Adrian Vale stood in the freezing rain outside a rundown grocery store, his $1,000 shoes replaced by worn sneakers with holes in the soles. The most feared crime boss on the East Coast had just clocked in for minimum wage, and nobody recognized him. No bodyguards, no empire, no name that made men tremble. Just Nate, a broke nobody that the world looked straight through. He'd spent 20 years building an empire where everyone wanted something from him, and now he was about to find out if anyone could love the man beneath the crown. The test had begun, and there was no going back. If you're hooked already, smash that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's dive in. The rain came down harder as Adrian Vale, as Nate Mercer now, pushed through the employee entrance of Morrison's Grocery on the south side of the city. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made the cracked linoleum floors look even more depressing. He was 3 hours into his first shift, and his feet already ached in ways he'd forgotten were possible. "Mercer, aisle 7 needs restocking. Move it!" The voice belonged to Derek, the assistant manager, a balding man in his 40s who wore his tiny amount of authority like a general's uniform. In Adrian's real life, men like Derek wouldn't dare meet his eyes. They'd stammer and sweat and do whatever he asked before he even finished asking. But here, in this new skin, Derek felt perfectly comfortable barking orders and watching him scramble. Adrian grabbed the hand truck loaded with canned goods and wheeled it toward aisle 7, his shoulders protesting. He'd been trained to fight, to shoot, to negotiate million-dollar deals in 3 languages. Nobody had trained him to stock shelves for 8 hours straight, while a middle manager treated him like he was too stupid to breathe. "Careful with those," Derek called after him. "Last guy dropped a case and it came out of his paycheck." Adrian didn't respond. He'd learned that much already. The invisible didn't talk back. This whole thing had started 6 weeks ago, in his penthouse office overlooking the city. Adrian had been sitting at his desk reviewing reports from his operations across 5 states, when Marcus, his oldest friend and most trusted lieutenant, had walked in with the usual updates. Numbers, percentages, territories expanding, enemies contained. Everything running smooth. "Another one bailed," Marcus had said, dropping a folder on the desk. "That actress you were seeing took the jewelry and ran. Tabloids already have photos of her with some tech billionaire in Monaco." Adrian hadn't even looked up. "Which one was she?" "The brunette. Said she loved you. Lasted 3 months." "They always last about 3 months." Adrian had closed the file in front of him, suddenly tired. "That's how long it takes them to realize I'm not going to marry them and make them queens of the empire. Then they take whatever they can carry and find the next rich bastard." Marcus had poured himself a drink from the bar cart. "You could try dating someone who isn't a professional gold digger." "I've tried everything, Marcus. Actresses, models, businesswomen, socialites, even that nonprofit director who seemed genuinely good." Adrian had stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city he controlled from the shadows. "They all want the same thing: the power, the money, the status, the access. Nobody sees me. They see what I can do for them." "So what are you going to do? Become a monk?" That's when the idea had hit him. Crazy, reckless, maybe impossible. But once it lodged in his brain, he couldn't shake it. "I'm going to disappear." Marcus had choked on his drink. "What?" "I'm going to become nobody, completely broke, invisible. And I'm going to find out if anyone can love me when I have nothing to offer." "That's insane." "Probably. But I need to know, Marcus. I need to know if it's even possible." It had taken 2 weeks to set everything up. Marcus handled the empire. He'd been doing half the real work for years anyway. Adrian's lawyers created a bulletproof false identity. Nate Mercer, 34, high school education, work history of low-wage jobs and long gaps of unemployment. A cheap apartment in a neighborhood where Adrian had never set foot. Clothes from thrift stores. A bus pass. $300 in a checking account at a bank that charged fees for being poor. The hardest part had been the goodbye. Not to people. Adrian didn't have real relationships to leave behind, but to the life itself. The power. The control. The certainty that he could fix or destroy almost anything with a phone call. 6 months, Marcus had said the night before Adrian disappeared. "That's my limit. If you're not back in 6 months, I'm coming to get you." Deal. And Adrian? Be careful. You're going into a world that doesn't give a damn if you live or die. No guards, no backup, no second chances. I know. That's the point. Now, 3 weeks into the experiment, Adrian understood what Marcus had meant. The world treated poor people like they were disposable, invisible. He'd applied to 30 jobs before Morrison's Grocery finally hired him. Most places hadn't even bothered to reject him. They just never called back. The apartment he'd rented had mold in the bathroom and a landlord who cashed checks but didn't fix anything. His neighbors looked through him like he wasn't there. "Yo, Mercer, you deaf! I said aisle 7! Adrian snapped back to the present and started shelving cans of soup, forcing his hands to move at the pace of someone who needed this job to eat. Someone who couldn't afford to get fired for having an attitude. He was halfway through the third case when he heard her voice. "Excuse me? Do you work here?" Adrian turned and froze. She was standing at the end of the aisle wearing a faded purple jacket that had seen better years and holding a list in her hands. Mid-20s, maybe. Soft features, gentle brown eyes, brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She was overweight, the kind of woman fashion magazines and movies taught people to ignore. But there was something in her expression that made Adrian forget the stock phrase he was supposed to say. She looked kind. Genuinely kind. Like she actually cared whether he had a good answer. "Yeah, I work here," he managed. "What do you need?" "I'm looking for the pasta aisle. I know that sounds silly, but this store is bigger than I thought, and I'm kind of turned around." Her voice was quiet, almost apologetic, like she was afraid of being a burden. Something about that made Adrian's chest tighten. "It's not silly. Store's laid out weird." He pointed toward the back. "Aisle 12. Other side. Near the deli." "Thank you so much." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes, and started to walk away. "You shopping for a lot of people?" The question came out before Adrian could stop it. She turned back, surprised. "What?" "Your list. It's long. Just wondering if you're feeding a family or something." Why was he talking to her? He was supposed to be invisible. Do the job. Go home. Don't make connections. But she didn't seem bothered by the question. If anything, she looked pleased that someone had noticed. "Oh, no, not a family. I run a reading program for kids at the community center on Maple Street. We do snack time after the sessions, and I try to keep it healthy. You know, fruit, crackers, peanut butter, stuff that doesn't cost too much but isn't total junk." She paused, suddenly self-conscious. "Sorry, you probably don't care about all that." "I do care." The words came out softer than he'd intended, and for a second they just looked at each other. Adrian could see the exact moment she decided he wasn't making fun of her, the small relaxation in her shoulders, the slight warming of her smile. "Well, thank you for caring, and for the directions." She turned again, heading for aisle 12. Adrian watched her go, something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Then Derek's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Mercer, stop flirting and finish stocking. We got a truck coming in 20 minutes. Adrian went back to the cans, but his mind stayed on the girl in the purple jacket. The next time he saw her was 4 days later, outside the Morrisons, where he'd just finished a double shift. His body ached in places he didn't know could ache, and all he wanted was to collapse on the lumpy mattress in his depressing apartment and sleep for 12 hours. But there she was, standing under the broken streetlight near the bus stop, struggling with 3 bags of groceries that looked like they were about to split. She kept shifting them, trying to find a grip that would work. And Adrian could see from 20 feet away that she was losing the battle. He should walk past. Stay invisible. Get on his bus and go home. Instead, he crossed the parking lot. "Need help?" She looked up, startled, then recognition crossed her face. "Oh, you're from the other day, the pasta directions guy." "Nate," he said, offering his hand. "Nate Mercer." "Lily Hart." She shook his hand with the 2 fingers that weren't occupied holding bags. Her grip was warm and a little uncertain. "And yes, I really do need help. These bags are about 2 seconds from exploding all over the sidewalk. Let me take them." "You don't have to." "I know. Let me anyway." She studied him for a second, like she was trying to figure out if this was safe or if he had some angle. Then she handed over 2 of the bags, keeping the lightest one for herself. "Thank you. I usually make 2 trips, but I was running late and thought I could manage everything at once. Classic overconfidence. They started walking toward the bus stop together, and Adrian noticed how slowly she moved. Not lazy, but careful. Like she'd learned to take up as little space as possible. Like she'd spent years trying not to be noticed. He knew that feeling now. He'd only been living it for 3 weeks, but he recognized it in her like a mirror. "You waiting for the number 12? He asked. "Yeah, you too?" "Yeah." They stood together in the cool evening air, and Adrian found himself studying her in his peripheral vision. She had a softness about her that the world probably saw as weakness. But there was something else there too, something steady and genuine that most people missed because they didn't bother looking past the surface. "So the reading program," he said. "How long have you been doing that?" Lily's face lit up, and suddenly she looked completely different, alive, passionate. 3 years. It started as just me and 4 kids in my apartment, but it grew. Now we have about 20 kids who come regularly, ages 5 to 12. Most of them are behind in school, or their parents work nights and can't help with homework, or they just need a safe place to be for a few hours. She paused, then added quietly, "Nobody else was doing it, you know? So I figured I would." "That's incredible." "It's not incredible. It's just necessary." She looked down at the bag in her hands. "Sometimes I think I'm not doing enough. The center where we meet is falling apart, and I can barely afford supplies, and I'm not a real teacher or anything. I just love books and kids, and I'm trying my best." Adrian felt something crack open inside him. Here was someone who had nothing, no money, no status, no power, and she was giving everything she had to help children who weren't even hers. She expected no recognition, no reward. She was doing it because somebody had to. "Trying your best is more than most people do," he said quietly. Lily looked at him then, really looked at him, and Adrian felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with his disguise. It was like she could see straight through to the parts of him he'd kept buried for years. "What about you?" she asked. "What's your story, Nate Mercer?" He almost laughed. What could he possibly say that wouldn't be a lie? "Not much to tell. I'm just trying to figure some things out. Took this job to clear my head." "Stocking shelves clears your head?" "Better than some alternatives." She smiled at that, and Adrian realized he wanted to make her smile again, and again, as many times as possible. The bus pulled up, hydraulics hissing. They climbed aboard together, and Lily swiped her pass while Adrian fed crumpled bills into the machine. The only empty seats were in the back, side by side. They sat, and the bags rested between them like a barrier that wasn't really a barrier at all. "Can I ask you something?" Lily said after a few stops. "Sure." "Why did you help me?" "With the bags, I mean." Most people would have just kept walking. Adrian considered the question. In his real life, he helped people when it served his interests. Information, loyalty, leverage. But here, in this moment, there was no angle, no benefit, no strategy. "Because you looked like you needed help," he said simply, "and because I wanted to." Lily was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was soft. "People don't usually want to. Help me, I mean." "Why not?" She shrugged, but Adrian could see the hurt underneath it. "I'm not the kind of person people notice. I'm overweight, I'm shy, I don't have money or connections or anything interesting to offer. I'm just plain, forgettable." Adrian turned to look at her fully, and the automatic denial died on his lips. Because he understood suddenly that she didn't want empty reassurance. She wanted honesty. "You're not forgettable," he said. "I remembered you from one 30-second conversation about pasta. That's not nothing. But that's sweet. But I'm not being sweet. I'm being honest. You do something real. You care about kids nobody else cares about. You smile at strangers in grocery stores like they're worth smiling at. That's the opposite of forgettable. That's rare." Lily stared at him, and Adrian saw tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, but not before one escaped down her cheek. "Sorry," she whispered. "I'm not used to people saying things like that. Maybe people should say them more often." The bus lurched to a stop, and Lily stood quickly, grabbing her bag. "This is me. Thank you for carrying the groceries and for talking to me. Anytime." She started to walk away, then turned back. "The reading program meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 6 to 8 p.m., at the community center on Maple Street. if you ever want to stop by. We always need volunteers, but no pressure or anything. I just thought, I don't know. You seem like someone who might care about that kind of thing. I'll think about it, Adrian said, even though he already knew he'd be there. Lily nodded and stepped off the bus, and Adrian watched through the window as she walked down the darkening street, carrying her groceries and her impossible kindness into a world that didn't deserve either. He showed up the following Tuesday with no plan beyond seeing her again. The community center on Maple Street was worse than he'd imagined. The building looked like it had been condemned and then uncondemned by someone who didn't want to do the paperwork. Cracked windows covered with cardboard, graffiti on the walls, a front door that hung slightly crooked on its hinges. Adrian pushed inside and followed the sound of children's voices down a narrow hallway that smelled like mildew and old paint. The room at the end was small and cramped, with mismatched furniture and fluorescent lights that flickered epileptically. But it was clean, and there were books everywhere, stacked on shelves, piled in corners, scattered across tables. And there was Lily, sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by 7 kids of various ages, reading from a picture book with voices and gestures that made them giggle. She was completely absorbed, giving the story everything she had, and the children were riveted. Adrian stood in the doorway and just watched. She looked different here, less apologetic, more herself. Like this cramped, broken-down room was the one place in the world where she didn't have to make herself smaller. One of the kids noticed him and tugged on Lily's sleeve. She looked up, saw him, and her whole face brightened. "Nate, you came!" She stood, and suddenly all 7 kids were staring at him with the brutal honesty only children could manage. "Everyone, this is my friend Nate. Nate, this is everyone." A small girl with braids raised her hand. "Are you Lily's boyfriend?" "Maya." Lily's face went bright red. "That's not... We're just friends. He works at the grocery store where I shop." "Do you like reading?" asked a boy with glasses who looked about 10. "Yeah," Adrian said, stepping into the room. "I do." "What's your favorite book?" asked another girl, younger, missing her front teeth. Adrian's mind went blank. What the hell was his favorite book? In his real life, he read intelligence reports and financial statements. When was the last time he'd read something just because he wanted to? "The Count of Monte Cristo," he said finally, pulling up a memory from college. "What's it about?" the boy with glasses asked. "Revenge," Adrian said, then caught Lily's expression. "And forgiveness. Eventually." "Cool." Lily rescued him by clapping her hands together. "Okay, team, let's finish our story and then we'll do snack time. Nate, there's a chair in the corner if you want to sit." He sat and watched as she guided the kids through the rest of the picture book, then helped them sound out words in their own reading books. She was patient in a way that didn't feel forced. She never talked down to them. She listened when they spoke, really listened, like their thoughts and feelings mattered as much as any adults. During snack time, apple slices and crackers with peanut butter, the kids swarmed around him with questions. Where did he live? Did he have any pets? Could he do a handstand? Had he ever been to Disneyland? Adrian answered as honestly as he could without revealing anything real. Yes, he lived nearby. No pets. Couldn't do a handstand. Never been to Disneyland. That last one made them gasp in collective horror. "You've never been?" Maya demanded. "Never." "That's so sad," said the girl with missing teeth. "Everyone should go to Disneyland." "Maybe someday," Adrian said, and meant it. In his real life, he could buy Disneyland if he wanted to, but he'd never actually gone. Never stood in line for rides or eaten overpriced churros or watched fireworks with sticky-faced children. He'd been too busy building an empire. After snack time, the kids went back to their books, and Lily came to sit beside him on the floor, her back against the wall. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "It means a lot. To them. To me. I didn't do anything. You showed up, that's something." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the kids read and occasionally argue over who got which book. Adrian felt something he hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. Peace. Simple, uncomplicated peace. "Can I ask you something?" Lily said. "Sure." "Why did you really come tonight? I mean, you barely know me. You have your own life. You could have just been polite on the bus and never thought about it again." Adrian considered his answer carefully. Because you invited me, and because I wanted to see if what you're doing is real. And it's real. Lily smiled, that same genuine smile from the grocery store, and Adrian felt his carefully constructed walls cracking wider. The thing is, she said, most people don't think what I do matters. They see poor kids in a bad neighborhood, and they figure it's somebody else's problem. Or they donate money to feel good but never actually show up. You showed up. So did you. This is different. This is my purpose. My whole life, I felt kind of invisible, you know? Like, I don't quite fit anywhere. I'm too quiet, too big, too boring. But here, with these kids, I fit. I matter. They need me, and I need them right back. Adrian understood exactly what she meant. He'd spent 20 years being seen only for his power, and 3 weeks being invisible by design. But here, in this broken-down community center, with a woman who gave everything she had to children who had nothing, he felt like maybe he could be seen as something else entirely, something human. You're not boring, he said. Lily laughed softly. You don't have to keep saying nice things, Nate. I'm not saying them to be nice. I'm saying them because they're true. She looked at him then, and Adrian saw the exact moment she decided to believe him. It was subtle, a slight relaxation in her shoulders, a softening around her eyes. But it was there. Do you want to help me clean up? She asked. After the kids leave? Yeah, I'd like that. Over the following weeks, Adrian, Nate, became a regular at the Tuesday and Thursday sessions. He helped set up chairs, distributed snacks, listened to kids read stumbling stories about talking animals and space adventures. He learned their names, their quirks, their fears, their dreams, and he learned Lily. She worked a day job as a data entry clerk in a medical office, mind-numbing work that paid just enough to cover rent and groceries with almost nothing left over. She'd grown up in foster care after her mother died when she was 8. Never knew her father. Bounced between families who treated her like an obligation at best, a burden at worst. She'd aged out of the system at 18 with a high school diploma and no safety net. That's why I do this, she told him one night after the kids had gone home. They were sitting on the front steps of the community center, watching traffic crawl past. Because I know what it feels like to be invisible, to have nobody fighting for you. I can't fix everything for these kids, but I can give them a few hours a week where they matter. You're fighting for them, Adrian said. I'm trying, but honestly, sometimes I feel like I'm just putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. Look at this place. She gestured at the building behind them. It's falling apart. The landlord keeps raising the rent even though he won't fix anything. I'm using my own money to buy books and supplies, and I'm almost broke. I don't know how much longer I can keep this going. Adrian's instinct was to fix it immediately. One phone call and he could own this building. Another call and it would be renovated. A third call and Lily would have a salary, benefits, an endowment that would run the program forever. But that wasn't the point of this. The point was to see if someone could care about him without the power. If he fixed her problems, he'd just be proving that he couldn't exist without being the savior. So instead he said, You'll figure it out. You've made it this far. Have I? Lily's voice was small. Sometimes I think I'm just pretending to be strong enough to handle all this. You're not pretending. You're doing it. That's different. She leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture so natural and trusting it made Adrian's throat tight. This was the woman who said she was invisible, yet here she was, letting him see parts of herself she probably didn't show anyone else. Thank you, Nate, she whispered. For what? For being here. For caring. For treating me like I'm not invisible. Adrian closed his eyes and let himself feel the weight of her head on his shoulder, the warmth of her presence beside him, the terrifying and wonderful possibility that maybe, for the first time in his life, someone was beginning to care about him for reasons that had nothing to do with what he could provide. You were never invisible, Lily, he said quietly. The world just wasn't paying attention. It was the 8th week of Adrian's experiment when everything started to shift. He was at Morrison's, stocking shelves during the afternoon lull, when he overheard Derek talking to another employee near the break room. Yeah, corporate's sending some efficiency expert next week. Probably going to cut hours, maybe lay off the bottom performers. You know how it goes. Adrian's hand stilled on the cans he was shelving. In his real life, he'd been on both sides of those conversations. He'd made the cold calculations about who was expendable. He'd signed off on layoffs that destroyed families because the numbers said it was necessary. Now he was standing on the other side, and the numbers were about him. "Who do you think they'll cut?" the other employee asked. "The new guys, probably. Mercer's been decent, but he's only been here 2 months. Last in, first out." Adrian's jaw tightened. He didn't need this job. Not really. He had millions of dollars sitting in accounts under his real name. But that wasn't the point. The point was that, to the world, to Derek, to Morrison's corporate office, he was disposable. A line item. Expendable. He thought about Lily working her mind-numbing data entry job because it was the only thing standing between her and homelessness. He thought about the kids at the community center who depended on her showing up every week. He thought about all the people in this world who lived with a knife against their throats, one paycheck from disaster, invisible to everyone who had the power to help. "Mercer, you sleeping over there? Those shelves aren't going to stock themselves." Adrian turned and met Derek's eyes, and for half a second he let the mask slip. Let Derek see a flash of the man underneath, the man who could buy this entire grocery chain with a phone call and shut it down just to make a point. Derek actually took a step back, confusion crossing his face. Then Adrian locked it down, dropped his eyes, and went back to stocking shelves. But something had shifted inside him. He'd come here to find out if anyone could love him when he had nothing. He was starting to suspect the answer might be yes, but he was also realizing that the test itself was flawed. Because having nothing didn't just mean people might love you for the right reasons. It meant you were powerless to protect the people you cared about when they needed you most. The crisis came on a Thursday night. Adrian arrived at the community center for the reading session and immediately knew something was wrong. Lily was standing in the hallway outside their usual room, and she'd been crying. Her eyes were red and puffy, and she was holding a piece of paper that shook in her hands. "Lily, what happened?" She looked up at him, and the devastation in her expression made his chest constrict. "He's kicking us out, the landlord. He says the rent is going up $300 a month starting next week, and if we can't pay it, we're out." Her voice broke. "I can't afford that, Nate. I'm already using half my paycheck to keep this place. I don't have another $300. I don't have anywhere else to go." Adrian took the paper from her hands and read it. It was exactly what she'd said. A rent increase notice with language that was technically legal but obviously designed to force them out. "Who's your landlord?" "Richard Voss. He owns half the properties in this neighborhood. He's been trying to get us out for months because he wants to lease the space to some chain store for triple what I'm paying. But I kept making rent so he couldn't evict me. Now he's just pricing me out." Adrian knew the name. Richard Voss was a mid-level real estate operator, the kind of guy who made money squeezing poor people and calling it business. In his real life, Adrian had dealt with dozens of men like Voss. They were small-time predators who thrived on the powerlessness of their victims. "There has to be something we can do," Adrian said, his mind already racing through options. "Legal aid, maybe, or I already called. They said unless he's violating the lease, there's nothing they can do, and he's not violating anything. He's just being cruel." Lily wiped at her eyes with her sleeve. "I'm sorry. I know you don't need to hear about my problems. I don't know what to do." The kids started arriving, and Lily pulled herself together with visible effort. She smiled at them, joked with them, read stories with the same energy she always brought. But Adrian could see the cracks underneath, could see her breaking. After the session ended and the kids were gone, Lily sat on the floor surrounded by books and just stared at the wall. "I'm going to have to tell them next week," she said quietly, "that we're done, that I failed." "You didn't fail." "Yes, I did. I told them this place was safe, that I'd keep showing up. And now I can't, because I'm not strong enough or smart enough or rich enough to fight someone like Voss." Adrian sat beside her, and every instinct in his body screamed at him to fix this. One phone call, that's all it would take. One phone call, and Richard Voss would back down so fast his head would spin. But if he made that call, the experiment was over. Lily would know the truth, and everything between them, all the genuine connection, the honest moments, the possibility that she might care about him without knowing who he really was, would shatter. "What if we talk to him?" Adrian said instead. "Together. Maybe if he sees how much this program means to the kids." "Men like Voss don't care about kids, Nate. They care about money." Lily's voice was flat. I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose everything that matters. And there's nothing I can do about it. Adrian pulled her close, and she cried against his shoulder while his mind waged war with itself. This was exactly why he'd built his empire in the first place. Because the world was full of predators like Richard Voss, and the only way to protect yourself and the people you loved was to have more power than they did. But power had cost him everything else. It had isolated him, corrupted every relationship, made it impossible to know who cared about him versus who cared about what he could do for them. So what the hell was the right answer? "I'm not giving up," he said into Lily's hair. "We're going to figure this out." She pulled back and looked at him with exhausted eyes. "How?" "I don't know yet, but we will." It was a promise he wasn't sure he could keep without revealing himself. But looking at Lily, kind, selfless Lily, who gave everything she had to help children nobody else fought for, Adrian knew he would do whatever it took to protect her, even if it meant destroying the one real thing he'd found. The next morning, Adrian did something he'd sworn he wouldn't do. He called Marcus. "It's me," he said when his lieutenant picked up. "I need information." "Are you okay? What's wrong?" "I'm fine. I need you to pull everything you have on a guy named Richard Voss, real estate operator, works the South Side. I need to know how dirty he is." There was a pause. "Adrian, what are you doing?" "Just get me the information." "You promised 6 months of being invisible. It's only been 2. If you start using your real resources..." "I'm not using anything. I'm just asking for information. Can you get it or not?" Marcus sighed. "I'll have it by tonight. But Adrian, be careful. Whatever you're planning, think it through. You can't fix people's problems for them without revealing who you are." "I know." But he wasn't sure he cared anymore. The file arrived at his apartment that night via encrypted email. Adrian read through it on his battered laptop, and with every page his anger grew. Richard Voss wasn't just cruel, he was criminal. Housing code violations he'd bribed inspectors to ignore. Tenants he'd illegally evicted and then sued into silence. Money laundering through shell companies, tax evasion, and most damningly, allegations of sexual harassment from multiple women who'd been too afraid or too poor to press charges. The pattern was clear. Voss targeted vulnerable people, poor people, immigrants, single mothers, and crushed them under the weight of a system that protected men with money and lawyers. Adrian could destroy him, easily. One package of this information sent to the right journalists and prosecutors, and Richard Voss would spend the next decade in courtrooms and possibly prison. But if Adrian did that, questions would be asked. How did a grocery store clerk get access to confidential financial records and sealed legal documents? How did someone with no resources put together a case that would require teams of investigators and attorneys? The truth would come out, and Lily would know. Adrian closed the laptop and sat in the dark of his apartment, torn between 2 impossible choices. He could save Lily's program and lose her trust, or he could preserve the connection between them and watch her world collapse. Yay! Tuesday night, the reading session was subdued. The kids sensed something was wrong, and Lily was barely holding it together. She read with less energy, smiled less often, and kept glancing at the door like she expected Richard Voss to walk in and start packing boxes. Adrian helped clean up afterward, and when it was just the 2 of them, Lily sat on the edge of one of the tables and looked at him with eyes that had given up hope. "I went to see Voss yesterday," she said quietly. Adrian's blood went cold. "You did what?" "I tried to talk to him, explain about the kids, ask if there was any way we could work out a payment plan or find a compromise." Her voice was shaking. "He laughed at me, Nate. He actually laughed. Said poor people shouldn't run programs for poor kids if they can't afford it. Said I was wasting his time." "Lily, and then he..." She stopped, her face going pale. "What did he do?" "He said there might be a way we could work something out. That if I was nice to him, he could be flexible about the rent." The words came out barely above a whisper. "He put his hand on my knee. Told me to think about it and come back when I was ready to be reasonable." Adrian's vision went red. In his real life, he'd hurt people. He'd ordered violence when necessary. He'd made men disappear for crossing lines far less offensive than what Richard Voss had just done. And every protective, vicious instinct he'd built over 20 years was screaming at him to drag Voss into an alley and teach him what happened to men who touched women like that. Did he hurt you? Adrian's voice was deadly quiet. No, I left. But Nate, I don't know what to do. I can't pay the new rent. I can't go back there. I can't. Her voice broke, and she started crying. Adrian pulled her into his arms and held her while she shook. And behind the comfort, his mind was making calculations he'd promised himself he wouldn't make. Richard Voss had just crossed a line, and Adrian was done pretending to be powerless. Listen to me, he said, pulling back so he could look Lily in the eyes. You're not going back there. You're not dealing with him. I'll handle it. How? You're a grocery store clerk, Nate. What are you going to do? Good question. Adrian could feel the experiment crumbling around him. Every choice he made now would reveal pieces of the truth. But looking at Lily, sweet, selfless Lily, who'd been hurt by a predator simply because she didn't have the power to fight back, Adrian realized something. He'd set up this test to find out if anyone could love him without his power. But maybe that was the wrong question. Maybe the right question was whether he could use his power for something other than himself. I'll figure it out, he said. Trust me. Lily searched his face, and Adrian could see the doubt there. How could a poor man with no connections possibly stand up to someone like Richard Voss? But underneath the doubt, there was something else. A tiny, fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would finally fight for her. Okay, she whispered. I trust you. And with those 3 words, Adrian Vale, invisible, powerless Nate Mercer, made a choice that would change everything. Adrian left Lily and the community center with a promise to call her the next day, then walked 6 blocks through the rain before he stopped in a narrow alley between 2 shuttered buildings and pulled out the burner phone he'd kept hidden in his apartment. His hands were steady as he dialed, but his mind was racing through possibilities and consequences, each one darker than the last. Marcus answered on the first ring. Talk to me. I need you to do something, Adrian said, his voice low. And I need you to do it without asking questions. That bad? Worse. The file you sent me on Richard Voss, I need you to package it. Every violation, every bribe, every harassment allegation. Make it bulletproof. Then I need you to deliver it to someone who can actually do something with it. There was a long pause. Adrian, if you go after this guy using your resources, people are going to ask how a grocery store clerk got access to this kind of information. Your cover will be blown in 48 hours. I know. So what's the play here? Adrian closed his eyes and saw Lily's face, the devastation when she told him about Voss putting his hand on her knee, the exhausted hope when she'd said she trusted him. The play is that I'm done watching good people get crushed by predators just because I'm running some experiment in invisibility. This guy crossed a line. I'm putting him down. And the girl, Lily? She can't know it came from me. Not yet. Can you make it look like an anonymous tip? Something that would hold up to scrutiny? Marcus was quiet for a moment, and Adrian could practically hear him thinking through the logistics. I can route it through a nonprofit watchdog group. Make it look like they've been investigating Voss for months and finally got enough evidence to move. But Adrian, this doesn't solve your bigger problem. What problem? You're falling for her, and she doesn't even know who you are. Adrian leaned against the wet brick wall and let the rain soak through his cheap jacket. I know. So what happens when she finds out? When she realizes the broke guy she's been confiding in is actually a crime boss who's been lying to her for 2 months? I don't know, Marcus. I'm making this up as I go. That's not like you. Nothing about this is like me. That's the whole point. Adrian straightened and wiped rain from his face. Just get me the package on Voss. I'll handle the rest. You're sure about this? I'm sure he hurt someone I care about. That's enough. Marcus sighed. I'll have it ready by tomorrow afternoon. But Adrian, be careful. You're walking a very thin line here. Story of my life. Adrian ended the call and stood in the rain for another 10 minutes, letting the cold water clear his head. He just made a choice that would start unraveling everything he'd built over the past 2 months. Once he went after Voss, questions would follow. Investigations, scrutiny, and eventually, the truth. But when he thought about Lily sitting alone in that crumbling community center, trying to figure out how to tell 20 kids that she'd failed them, the choice didn't feel complicated at all. He'd spent 20 years building power to protect himself. Maybe it was time to use it to protect someone else. The next morning at Morrison's, Adrian was stocking the cereal aisle when Derek approached with a clipboard and an expression that meant bad news. Mercer, I need to talk to you. Adrian set down the box he was holding and waited. Corporate's doing the efficiency review next week, like I mentioned. They're looking at performance metrics, attendance, customer feedback, the whole deal. Derek shifted uncomfortably. I'm supposed to identify the bottom 10% in each department. You're new, your numbers are okay, but not great. And honestly, you don't really seem like you need this job anyway. What does that mean? It means you show up, you do the work, but you're not hungry for it. You're not trying to move up or make connections or kiss ass like everyone else who wants to keep their job. You're just here, like you're killing time. Adrian almost laughed. Derek had no idea how accurate that assessment was. So I'm getting cut? Not yet. But if you want to stay, you need to step it up. Smile more, talk to customers, show some initiative, prove you're worth keeping around. Derek paused, then added more quietly, for what it's worth, you're a decent guy. You don't cause problems, but decent doesn't pay the bills, you know? I know. Derek walked away and Adrian went back to shelving cereal while his mind worked through the implications. In his real life, he would have fired Derek just for the condescension in his voice. But here, in this skin, Derek was right. Adrian was just killing time, going through the motions. He didn't need this job, didn't care about it, and everyone could tell. Which meant that even in his experiment at being invisible, he was still failing at being genuinely poor. Because real poverty didn't give you the luxury of not caring. Real poverty meant every job was life or death. Every shift mattered. Every paycheck was the difference between eating and going hungry. He thought he was learning what it meant to have nothing, but he was still carrying the psychological safety net of knowing he could end this anytime he wanted. That wasn't the same thing at all. Excuse me, do you work here? Adrian turned to find an elderly woman with a cane squinting up at the top shelf. Yes, ma'am. What can I help you with? I need the whole grain oats, but they're too high up for me to reach. No problem. Adrian grabbed the box and handed it to her. Thank you, dear. You're very kind. She smiled at him, a real smile, warm and grateful. And Adrian felt something shift inside him. This was real. This moment. This woman who needed help and got it. This tiny exchange that meant nothing to him but might mean everything to her. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe Adrian had been killing time instead of actually living in the life he'd chosen. Maybe the whole point wasn't just to be poor, it was to understand what it meant to matter in small ways, to be needed for something other than power. You're welcome, he said, and meant it. That afternoon, Marcus texted him a location. Adrian took his lunch break and walked 8 blocks to a coffee shop he'd never been to, where Marcus was waiting in a back booth with a manila envelope. You look terrible, Marcus said by way of greeting. It's been a rough week. Adrian slid into the booth and took the envelope. This everything? Everything that matters. Housing violations going back 6 years. Financial records showing bribes to 3 different city inspectors. Testimony from 4 women willing to go on record about harassment, and tax documents that prove he's been laundering money through his properties. It's a federal case if the right prosecutor picks it up. Who's the right prosecutor? Assistant DA named Jennifer Reeves. She's clean, ambitious, and she's been trying to build cases against slumlords for 2 years. This will make her career. Adrian opened the envelope and scanned the contents. It was exactly what he'd asked for. Comprehensive, damning, and completely untraceable to him if Marcus had done his job right. The nonprofit cover story will hold? He asked. It'll hold. I've been feeding information to the Housing Justice Coalition for the past month. They think they've been investigating Voss independently. When this lands on Reeves' desk tomorrow, it'll look like the culmination of their work. And Lily's community center? The rent increase notice Voss sent her violates city rent control ordinances. Once Reeves starts digging, that'll be Exhibit A. The eviction will be blocked, and Voss will be too busy fighting criminal charges to bother her again. Adrian closed the envelope and looked at his oldest friend. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to blow back on you eventually. When Lily finds out what you did, she won't, not from this. Marcus shook his head. You're playing a dangerous game, Adrian. You're using your real power to solve her problems while pretending to be powerless. That's not sustainable. I know. So what's the end game here? You save her program, she's grateful, you keep lying about who you are until what? She falls in love with a fiction? The words hit harder than Adrian wanted to admit. I'm not trying to make her fall in love with me, aren't you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're doing everything a man does when he's falling for someone. You're showing up, you're protecting her, you're solving her problems. The only difference is you're doing it from behind a mask. It's not a mask. Nate is real. He's the part of me that exists without the Empire. Nate is a role you're playing, and when she finds out, she's going to feel betrayed. Not because you helped her, but because you lied about who you were while you did it. Marcus leaned forward. I'm telling you this as your friend. You need to tell her the truth before this gets any deeper. Adrian knew Marcus was right, but the thought of telling Lily the truth, of watching her face change from trust to shock to anger, made his chest tighten in ways he'd never experienced before. I will, he said finally. Just not yet. Let me get Voss handled first. Then I'll figure out the rest. Marcus didn't look convinced, but he nodded. Your call. But Adrian, when this blows up, and it will blow up, don't say I didn't warn you. They parted ways outside the coffee shop, and Adrian walked back to Morrison's with the envelope tucked inside his jacket. Tomorrow morning, this would land on Jennifer Reeves' desk. Within days, Richard Voss would be facing investigations that would consume his life, and Lily would be safe. But Marcus's words echoed in his head with every step. She's going to feel betrayed, not because you helped her, but because you lied about who you were while you did it. Adrian had built an empire on understanding people's motivations, reading their weaknesses, knowing exactly which levers to pull to get what he wanted. But with Lily, he was flying blind. He didn't know if she would forgive him for lying, didn't know if the connection they'd built was strong enough to survive the truth. All he knew was that for the first time in his life, the thought of losing someone actually terrified him. Thursday night's reading session felt different. Lily was still stressed, still worried about the rent increase, but there was a new determination in her eyes. She'd decided she wasn't going down without a fight. I've been calling around, she told Adrian while the kids were working on their books. Other community centers, churches, anywhere that might let us use space? Most places want money we don't have, but there's a church 2 miles from here that said they might be able to help. I'm meeting with their pastor next week. That's great, Adrian said, even though he knew it wouldn't matter. By next week, Voss would be too buried in legal problems to enforce the rent increase. I'm also thinking about starting a crowdfunding campaign. I hate asking for money, but if it means keeping this program going, I'll do it. These kids deserve better than losing their safe place because some landlord wants an extra $300 a month. She was fighting. Despite being terrified and exhausted and completely outmatched, she was fighting, and watching her refuse to give up made Adrian's heart ache with something he didn't have a name for. You're amazing, you know that? He said quietly. Lily laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm desperate, there's a difference. You're both. And the amazing part is winning. She looked at him with those soft brown eyes that saw more than he wanted them to see. Why are you so nice to me, Nate? What do you mean? I mean, you show up here twice a week. You help with kids who aren't your responsibility. You listen to me complain about my problems. You say things that make me feel like I matter. She paused. I'm not used to that, and I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For you to want something from me or get bored and disappear or turn out to be a creep like every other guy who's ever been nice to me. Adrian's throat went tight. I'm not going to do any of those things. How do I know that? Because I'm telling you, and because I care about you, Lily. I care about what you're doing here. I care about those kids. And I care about you being okay. Why? It was such a simple question, but Adrian didn't have a simple answer. Because you're the first person in 20 years who's seen me as something other than power and money. Because you're kind in a world that punishes kindness. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to be human instead of a weapon. But he couldn't say any of that without revealing pieces of the truth he wasn't ready to share. Because you deserve to have someone care, he said instead, and because I want to be that person, if you'll let me. Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she wiped at them quickly. You're going to make me cry in front of the kids. Sorry. Don't be. These are good tears. She squeezed his hand. Thank you, Nate, for being here, for being real. The word real hit him like a punch to the gut, because he wasn't real. Not completely. He was a carefully constructed fiction designed to answer a question he'd been too arrogant to realize was flawed from the beginning. But the feelings were real. The care was real. The desperate need to protect her was real. And that would have to be enough. Later that night, after the kids had gone home and they were cleaning up, Lily's phone rang. She looked at the screen and her whole body tensed. "It's him, Voss." "Don't answer it." "I have to." "What if he's calling about the rent? What if—" "Lily, don't." But she'd already answered, her hand shaking as she lifted the phone to her ear. "Hello?" Adrian couldn't hear what Voss was saying, but he could see Lily's face going pale. Her free hand clenched into a fist. Her breathing quickened. "No," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, I'm not going to do that." More words from Voss. Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Please, I'll figure out the money. Just give me more time, please." Adrian reached for the phone, but Lily turned away, still listening to whatever poison Voss was pouring into her ear. "I understand," she said finally, her voice breaking. "I understand." She ended the call and just stood there, staring at the phone like it was a snake. "What did he say?" Adrian asked, though he already knew it was bad from the look on her face. "He said the rent increase is final. I have until the end of the month to pay or get out. And he said—" She stopped, her whole body shaking. "He said if I came to see him alone, we could work something out privately. He was very specific about what that meant." Adrian's hands curled into fists. Every instinct he'd honed over 20 years of dealing with predators and enemies was screaming at him to find Richard Voss right now and break every bone in his body. To make him understand what happened to men who threatened women like that. But he couldn't do that. Not as Nate. Nate was powerless. Nate had no resources. Nate couldn't protect anyone. Except that wasn't true anymore. Because tomorrow morning, Jennifer Reeves would get the package that would destroy Richard Voss. And Lily would be safe. "Hey," Adrian said softly, pulling her into his arms. "Listen to me. He's not going to touch you. He's not going to take this place. I promise you, this is going to work out." "How can you promise that? You don't have any more power than I do." The words cut deep because they were supposed to be true. In this experiment, Adrian was supposed to be as powerless as everyone else struggling at the bottom. But he wasn't. He'd never been. And now his lie was protecting her, which made it both necessary and unbearable at the same time. "Just trust me," he said. "Please. Trust that sometimes things work out even when they seem impossible." Lily pulled back and looked at him with eyes that held equal parts hope and desperation. "I want to believe you. I really do. But Nate, I've been poor my whole life. I know how this story ends. People like me don't win against people like Voss. We just survive until we can't anymore. You're going to win this time, I swear it." She searched his face, and Adrian could see her wanting to believe him even though everything in her experience said she shouldn't. "Okay," she whispered finally. "Okay, I'll trust you." And with those words, Adrian felt the full weight of his deception settle onto his shoulders. Because she was trusting Nate, the broke, powerless grocery clerk who had no business making promises he couldn't keep. She had no idea she was trusting Adrian Vale, who could move mountains with a phone call, but had been lying to her about who he was since the moment they met. He walked her to her bus stop that night, and when she got on, she turned back and gave him a small, exhausted wave. Adrian watched the bus disappear into the night and made himself a promise. He would save her program. He would destroy Richard Voss. And then, when the dust settled, he would tell her the truth. All of it. And whatever happened after that, he would accept. But first, Voss had to fall. The package reached Jennifer Reeves's desk at 9:30 Friday morning. Adrian knew because Marcus texted him a simple confirmation. Delivered. By noon, 3 reporters had called Richard Voss asking for comment on allegations of housing violations and harassment. By 2 p.m., a team of city inspectors showed up at 4 of his properties. By 4 p.m., the Housing Justice Coalition issued a press release calling for a full investigation into his business practices. Adrian followed it all on his phone during his shift at Morrison's, his heart pounding with satisfaction and dread in equal measure. It was working. The machine he'd set in motion was grinding Voss into dust exactly as planned, but it also meant questions would start soon. How did all this happen at once? Who put this package together? Where did the information come from? And eventually, If investigators dug deep enough, they might find threads that led back to Marcus, and from Marcus to Adrian, and then everything would unravel. He was taking the biggest risk of his life, and the only thing that made it worthwhile was knowing that Lily would be safe. Mercer, customer needs help in aisle 3. Adrian pocketed his phone and went to help an old man reach a jar of pickles, and for the next few hours, he forced himself to just be Nate, to exist in this small, powerless life he'd chosen, to pretend he wasn't the puppet master pulling strings that would destroy a man's entire existence. When his shift ended, he found Lily waiting outside the store. She was bundled in her purple jacket, her face flushed from the cold, and she was holding her phone like it was a winning lottery ticket. Nate, you're not going to believe what happened. What? Boss is being investigated. It's all over the news. The city is looking into his properties for code violations, and there are allegations of bribery and harassment. Multiple women are coming forward. Her eyes were wide with shock and hope. They're saying he might be arrested, that he's going to lose everything. Adrian made himself look surprised. That's incredible. I know, and there's more. A legal aid attorney called me this afternoon. She said the rent increase he sent me violates city ordinances because of how much and how fast he raised it. She's filing an emergency motion to block the eviction. She thinks we'll win. Lily, that's amazing. I don't understand how this all happened at once. It's like someone... She stopped, her expression shifting. It's like someone was protecting me. Adrian's heart skipped. What do you mean? I mean, this is too convenient. Voss threatens me on Thursday, and by Friday afternoon he's being destroyed from 6 different directions. That doesn't just happen randomly. Sometimes bad people finally get what's coming to them. Maybe the universe was just paying attention. Lily looked at him with those 2 perceptive eyes. Do you believe in that? The universe paying attention? I believe in people paying attention. And I believe that when enough people finally see what someone's doing, justice has a way of catching up. She wanted to believe him. He could see it in her face. But there was also something else there, a tiny seed of suspicion that he'd seen too many times in his real life. The look people got when they sensed they were being played but couldn't quite figure out how. Well, whoever's responsible, I'm grateful, she said finally. I'm just grateful. They walked together to the bus stop, and Lily talked the whole way about her plans for the program now that it might survive. New books she wanted to buy, art supplies, maybe even a field trip to the library downtown. She was animated in a way Adrian had never seen before, and watching her hope come back to life made every risk he'd taken feel worth it. But when they reached the stop and waited for their buses, she turned to him with a serious expression. Nate, can I ask you something? Of course. If you had power, real power, would you use it to help people, or would you use it for yourself? The question caught him off guard. Why are you asking? Because I've been thinking about it a lot lately, about how different the world would be if the people with power actually cared about the people without it, if they used their money and influence to fix things instead of just taking more for themselves. She looked down at her hands. I know it's naive, but sometimes I imagine what I'd do if I suddenly had $1 million, or knew important people, or had any kind of real influence, and I think I'd try to help, to make things better, even if it was just a little bit. Adrian's throat tightened. I think you'd be amazing at it. What about you? What would you do? He thought about his empire, about the 20 years he'd spent building power and using it to protect himself, expand his territory, crush his enemies, and accumulate more wealth than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. He'd told himself it was necessary, that the world was brutal and only the strong survived. But looking at Lily, genuinely good Lily who had nothing and gave everything, Adrian realized how hollow that justification had always been. I think I'd try to be more like you, he said quietly. Use whatever I had to help people who needed it. Make things better instead of just protecting my own interests. You're sweet. I'm honest. Lily's bus pulled up and she started to board, then turned back. Nate, thank you for being here, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You don't know how much that means. I think I do. She smiled and got on the bus, and Adrian watched it pull away into traffic. Then he pulled out his phone and called Marcus. It's done, he said when Marcus answered. Voss is falling apart exactly like we planned. I know. I've been monitoring it. Reeves is going after him hard. He'll be in custody by Monday, probably. Good. Adrian, we need to talk about the next part. Because Lily's going to start asking questions. And when she does, I'll handle it. How? Adrian closed his eyes and felt the weight of every lie he'd told settling onto his chest. I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. You're in love with her. It wasn't a question. Marcus said it like a fact, and Adrian didn't have the energy to deny it. Yeah, I think I am. Then you need to tell her the truth before someone else does. Because this can't stay hidden forever, and the longer you wait, the worse it's going to be when it comes out. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're about to lose the first real thing you've had in 20 years because you're too scared to be honest. The words stung because they were true. Adrian had faced down rival crime bosses, federal investigators, and assassination attempts without flinching. But the thought of telling Lily the truth and watching her look at him with betrayal instead of trust made him want to run. I'll tell her, he said. Soon. I just need to make sure she's completely safe first. Adrian, I'll tell her, Marcus, I promise. But as he hung up and started walking home through the darkening streets, Adrian wasn't sure he could keep that promise. Because telling Lily the truth meant risking everything. And he'd just discovered that some things were more terrifying than any enemy he'd ever faced, like the possibility that the one person who'd seen him as human might never look at him the same way again. Monday morning brought rain and headlines. Adrian was restocking the bread aisle when he saw it on his phone. Richard Voss arrested on multiple charges including bribery, tax evasion, and criminal harassment. The photograph showed him being led out of his office building in handcuffs, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. 3 of his properties had been condemned overnight. His bank accounts were frozen pending investigation. The machine Adrian had built was running perfectly, grinding Voss into nothing with the efficiency of a system that never forgot and never forgave. In his old life, Adrian would have felt satisfaction at watching an enemy destroyed. But now, standing in a grocery store wearing a name tag that wasn't his, all he felt was the growing weight of what he'd done and what it meant. His phone buzzed with a text from Lily. Can you come to the center tonight? Something happened. Good news, but I need to tell you in person. He texted back immediately. I'll be there. The rest of his shift dragged like hours were days. Derek came by twice to remind him about the efficiency review, about smiling more and engaging customers, about proving he deserved to keep his job. Adrian nodded and said the right things while his mind stayed locked on Lily and whatever news she had to share. When 6 o'clock finally came, he clocked out and practically ran the 8 blocks to the community center. Lily was waiting outside, and the moment Adrian saw her face, he knew something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't just happy, she was radiant, transformed, like someone had lifted a crushing weight off her shoulders, and she was remembering what it felt like to breathe. Nate! She threw her arms around him before he could say anything, hugging him so tightly he could feel her heartbeat against his chest. It's over. It's really over. What happened? She pulled back, her eyes shining with tears that hadn't fallen yet. The legal aid attorney called this morning. Voss's arrest triggered an emergency audit of all his properties. The judge ruled that every rent increase he issued in the past 6 months was illegal. Every single one. And because of the code violations, the city is taking over management of his buildings until everything gets sorted out. Lily, that's incredible. It gets better. The community center's rent is being rolled back to what it was a year ago. And the new management company said they're going to do actual repairs, real repairs. They're fixing the roof, the electrical, everything. She was laughing and crying at the same time. We're not just surviving, Nate. We're actually going to be okay. Adrian felt something break open in his chest, relief so profound it almost hurt. She was safe. The program was safe. The kids were safe. Everything he'd risked had been worth it. I'm so happy for you, he said, and meant it with every part of himself. I keep thinking about what you said, about the universe paying attention. Maybe you were right. Maybe someone was looking out for us. She wiped at her eyes. Or maybe good things can actually happen to good people sometimes. I don't know. I'm just grateful. They walked into the center together, and the kids swarmed Lily the moment they saw her, sensing her joy and feeding off it. She told them about the rent being fixed and the repairs that were coming, and they cheered like she'd told them they were going to Disneyland. Adrian stood back and watched, and something Marcus had said kept echoing in his mind. You're in love with her. He was. Completely. Terrifyingly. He loved the way she read stories with different voices for every character. Loved how she always made sure the quietest kids got heard. Loved that she cried when she was happy and fought when she was scared and gave everything she had to people who could never pay her back. And she had no idea who he really was. After the reading session ended and the kids had gone home, Lily sat beside him on the floor surrounded by picture books and looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Can I tell you something?" she asked quietly. "Always. I've been alone for most of my life, not just single, but actually alone. No family, no close friends, nobody who really saw me or cared whether I was okay." She picked at a loose thread on her jacket. "And then you showed up. This guy who had no reason to care about me or my problems, and you just stayed. You kept showing up. You helped without asking for anything back. And I don't know what to do with that." Adrian's throat tightened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm scared. Because I'm starting to care about you, Nate, a lot. And every time I've cared about someone, they've either left or hurt me or turned out to be someone completely different than I thought they were." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were full of vulnerability that made his heart ache. "So I need to know if you're real. If this is real. Because I can't handle another person breaking my heart." The question hung in the air between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Adrian could give her the answer she wanted. The comfortable lie that Nate Mercer was exactly who he appeared to be. Or he could tell her the truth and watch everything between them shatter. He chose the coward's path. "I'm real," he said, hating himself for it. "I care about you, Lily. That part is completely real." It wasn't technically a lie. He did care about her. The feelings were genuine even if the identity wasn't. But the distinction felt meaningless as he watched her smile with relief, trusting him when she shouldn't, believing in a version of him that was only half true. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay. I believe you." She leaned her head on his shoulder, and Adrian wrapped his arm around her, holding her close, while guilt ate him alive from the inside. This was the moment. He should tell her now, rip the bandage off and deal with the consequences. But then she said, "I think I might be falling for you," and every word Adrian had prepared died in his throat. "Lily, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. Because I've never felt this way about anyone before, and it's terrifying and wonderful at the same time, and I needed to tell you before I lost my nerve." She lifted her head and looked at him, and Adrian saw everything he'd been searching for during this entire experiment. She cared about him. Not his power or his money or his status, just him. The person he was when he showed up and listened and helped and stayed, except she didn't know who that person really was. "I'm falling for you too," he said, because it was true and because he couldn't not say it. "You're the most real thing that's happened to me in years." Lily kissed him then, soft and uncertain and sweet, and Adrian kissed her back, memorizing every second because he knew it wouldn't last. Couldn't last, not built on a foundation of lies. When they finally pulled apart, Lily was smiling. "I should get home. I have work in the morning, and I'm so tired I can barely think straight. But Nate, thank you. For everything. For being exactly what I needed when I needed it most." The words were a knife between his ribs. He walked her to the bus stop and watched her leave, and then he stood in the rain and called Marcus. "I have to tell her," Adrian said without preamble. "I have to tell her everything. Finally." "When?" "I don't know. Soon. I just need to figure out how to do it without destroying her." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Adrian, I'm going to be honest with you. There's no version of this conversation that doesn't hurt her. You've been lying since the day you met. She's going to feel betrayed no matter how you frame it." "I know. But if you really care about her, you'll tell her anyway. Give her the choice to decide what this means and whether she can forgive you. Don't take that agency away from her by keeping her in the dark." "What if she can't forgive me?" "Then you accept it and move on. But at least you'll have been honest. At least you'll have given her the truth." Adrian ended the call and walked home through streets that felt emptier than they had in weeks. His apartment, the shabby, cramped space he'd been living in for 2 months, felt like a prison cell tonight. He sat on the edge of his sagging mattress and stared at the water-stained ceiling and tried to figure out how to confess that everything she knew about him was a carefully constructed lie. But before he could plan anything, his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. "Hello?" Is this Nate Mercer? A woman's voice, professional and sharp. Yes. Who's this? My name is Jennifer Reeves. I'm an assistant district attorney. I'm calling because your name came up during our investigation into Richard Voss. Adrian's blood went cold. I don't understand. I barely know who that is. Really? Because we have records showing that Voss called a tenant named Lily Hart multiple times in the past week, and her phone records show she's been in frequent contact with your number. We're interviewing everyone connected to his properties as part of our case. It was a fishing expedition. Reeves had no evidence connecting Adrian to anything, but she was smart enough to follow the threads and see where they led. I'm a friend of Lily's, Adrian said carefully. I volunteer at a reading program. That's the only connection. And you don't have any information about how the evidence against Voss was compiled? No knowledge of who might have investigated his business practices or gathered the documentation we received? No. I just stock shelves at a grocery store. I don't know anything about investigations. There was a pause, and Adrian could practically hear her thinking. Interesting, because the package we received was incredibly thorough, professional quality, the kind of thing that takes resources and access most ordinary citizens don't have. Then maybe you should be asking whoever sent it instead of harassing Lily's friends. Fair point. I apologize for the intrusion. If you think of anything that might be helpful, please give me a call. She rattled off a number. And Mr. Mercer? Take care of Lily. From what I've heard, she deserves people looking out for her. The call ended, and Adrian sat in the darkness with his heart pounding. Reeves was good, better than he'd anticipated. She didn't have anything concrete yet, but she was asking the right questions. And if she kept pulling threads, eventually she'd find something that connected back to Marcus, and from Marcus to Adrian Vale, which meant his time was running out faster than he'd thought. The next morning at Morrison's, Derek pulled him aside with an expression that meant the other shoe had finally dropped. Corporate made their decisions, Derek said without preamble. They're cutting 12 positions across all departments. You're one of them. Adrian had been expecting this, but it still hit harder than it should have. When? End of the week. I'm sorry, Mercer. You're not a bad worker. You just didn't fight hard enough to keep the job. In this economy, that's all it takes. I understand. We'll process your final paycheck by Friday. And look, for what it's worth, you seem like a smart guy. You'll land on your feet. Derek walked away, and Adrian went back to stocking shelves with the strange sense that the universe was making decisions for him. His cover job was gone. Reeves was asking questions. Lily had just told him she was falling for him. Everything was converging toward a point where the truth would come out whether he was ready or not. He made it through his shift on autopilot, then took the bus to Lily's neighborhood instead of his own. He didn't have a plan. He just knew he needed to see her, needed to figure out how to tell her everything before someone else did it for him. He found her at a small playground near her apartment building, sitting on a bench and watching pigeons fight over breadcrumbs. She looked surprised when she saw him. Nate? What are you doing here? I needed to see you. Can we talk? Something in his tone made her expression shift. What's wrong? Adrian sat beside her and tried to find words that would make this easier. They didn't exist. I lost my job today. Morrison's is doing layoffs and I didn't make the cut. Oh no, Nate, I'm so sorry. Are you going to be okay? Do you need money for rent or... I'm fine. That's not why I'm telling you. He took a breath. I'm telling you because I'm realizing I can't keep doing this. Living day to day, pretending everything's fine, not being honest about who I am and what I want. Lily's face went pale. Are you breaking up with me? We're not even officially together and you're already... No, that's not what I'm saying. Adrian grabbed her hand. I'm saying the opposite. I want to be with you, Lily, really be with you, but I need to be honest first, about everything. Honest about what? You're scaring me. This was it, the moment where everything would either break or somehow impossibly survive. My real name isn't Nate Mercer, Adrian said quietly. Lily went very still. What? I've been lying to you since the day we met, about who I am, where I come from, why I'm here, and I need to tell you the truth because I can't keep lying to someone I care about this much. She pulled her hand away from his. I don't understand. What are you talking about? Adrian's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. 2 months ago, I made a decision to disappear from my real life and become someone else, someone invisible, someone with no money or power or connections. I wanted to find out if anyone could care about me when I had nothing to offer. And then I met you. You're not making any sense. Are you in witness protection? Are you running from something? No, nothing like that. He stopped. How did you tell someone you were a crime boss? How did you explain that you'd built an empire on violence and fear, and you'd been pretending to be poor while secretly using your real resources to solve her problems? Just tell me, Lily said, and her voice was shaking. Whatever it is, just say it. My real name is Adrian Vale. I run a criminal organization that operates across 5 states. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. And I've been lying to you because I wanted to know if someone could love me for who I am instead of what I have. The words hung in the air like bombs waiting to detonate. Lily stared at him for what felt like an eternity. Then she started laughing, a harsh, broken sound that had nothing to do with humor. This is a joke, right? You're messing with me. I'm not joking. I wish I was. So you're telling me you're some kind of crime boss who's been pretending to be a broke grocery store clerk? That everything about you has been a lie? Not everything. My feelings for you are real. The person I am when I'm with you is real. But yes, the rest of it was a lie. Lily stood up so fast she almost fell. Get away from me. Lily, please. No, don't please me. Don't you dare. Her voice was rising and people in the playground were starting to stare. I told you I've spent my whole life being used and discarded. I told you I needed to know you were real, and you looked me in the eye and lied. I was going to tell you. I was trying to find the right time. The right time? What? When, Nate or Adrian, whatever the hell your name is, when were you going to tell me? After I fell completely in love with you? After I trusted you with everything? Tears were streaming down her face. Or were you just going to keep playing your little game until you got bored and went back to your real life? It wasn't a game. It stopped being a game the moment I met you. Then what was it? Some social experiment? Let's see if the fat, lonely girl can love a rich man pretending to be poor? Is that what this was? The words cut deeper than anything Adrian had experienced in 20 years of violence and betrayal. No, that's not what this was. I came here looking for something real, and I found it with you. Everything between us is real. How can you say that? How can anything be real when you've been lying about who you are from the very beginning? Lily wrapped her arms around herself like she was holding herself together. Did you laugh about me, with your friends or whoever? Did you tell them about the pathetic community center and the poor girl who fell for your act? I never laughed about you. I've never told anyone except my closest friend, and only because I needed help keeping you safe. Keeping me safe? Her voice went sharp. From what? And here was the other truth he'd been avoiding. From Voss. The investigation, the arrest, all of it. I made that happen. I used my real resources to gather evidence and put him away because he threatened you. Lily's face went from hurt to horror to rage so fast, Adrian barely had time to track the change. You did what? I couldn't let him hurt you. I couldn't stand by and watch him destroy your program when I had the power to stop him. So you played hero? You swooped in and saved the helpless poor girl because she couldn't save herself? She was shouting now, and Adrian wanted to reach for her but knew he'd lost that right. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? I thought I was fighting for myself. I thought I was finally standing up and making things work. But it was all you. You were pulling strings in the background, manipulating everything, making decisions about my life without telling me. I was trying to protect you. I didn't ask to be protected. I asked to be seen, to be valued, to be treated like I mattered. Her voice broke. And you treated me like a project, like some experiment in whether rich people can slum it with the poors and find true love. That's not fair. You know that's not what this was. I don't know anything anymore. I don't know who you are or what you wanted from me or if any of it was real. She backed away from him. All I know is that I let myself trust someone for the first time in my life, and you've been lying to me every single day. Lily, please, let me explain. No, I'm done. I can't do this. She turned and started walking away. Adrian followed. You can hate me. You can never forgive me. But please, just let me make sure you're safe first. Let me... She spun around, and the look in her eyes stopped him cold. Safe from what? From you? Because right now, you're the person who hurt me most. Not Voss. Not anyone from my past. You. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. And the worst part is you did it while making me think you cared. While making me believe I finally mattered to someone. She wiped at her eyes with shaking hands. I need you to leave me alone. I need you to go back to your real life with your money and your power and your empire. And I need to forget I ever met you. I can't do that. I can't just disappear when he's... You already did disappear, she shouted. The person I cared about doesn't exist. Nate Mercer was a lie. So go back to being Adrian Vale and leave me alone. She walked away, and this time Adrian didn't follow. He just stood in the playground while the pieces of everything he'd built with her scattered like glass at his feet. He'd gotten his answer. Someone had cared about him when he had nothing. Lily had cared. She'd been falling for him, and he destroyed it by doing exactly what Marcus had warned him about, trying to save her while lying about who he was. Adrian pulled out his phone with hands that weren't quite steady and called Marcus. She knows, he said when Marcus answered. I told her everything and she hates me. It's over. Where are you? Playground near her apartment. She just left. She told me to disappear and I don't know what to do. Come home, Adrian. Come back to your real life. The experiment's over. But the thought of going back to his penthouse and his empire and his old existence felt impossible, because that life had been empty for years, and he'd only realized it after meeting a woman who'd shown him what it felt like to be genuinely seen. I don't want to go back, Adrian said quietly. That life doesn't mean anything without her in it. Then you need to give her time. Let her process this. And then, if she's willing to listen, you fight for her, not as the crime boss who can solve all her problems, as the man who loves her and wants to prove he's worth a second chance. What if she never wants to see me again? Then you accept it. But Adrian, don't give up yet. She's angry and hurt, but that doesn't mean it's over. It just means you have to prove you're more than the lie you told. Adrian ended the call and sat on the bench where Lily had been sitting, and for the first time in 20 years, he let himself cry. Not for his empire or his power or his carefully constructed identity, but for the woman who'd cared about a version of him that was more real than anything he'd been in decades, and the future they might have had if he'd just been brave enough to tell her the truth from the beginning. The rain started again, cold and relentless, and Adrian sat in it until he was soaked through. Then he stood and walked back toward his shabby apartment, knowing that tomorrow he'd have to make the hardest decision of his life. Go back to being Adrian Vale and accept that some things couldn't be fixed with money and power. Or find another way to prove to Lily that the man who'd shown up and stayed and cared was real, even if the name had been a lie. Adrian spent 3 days in his apartment doing nothing but thinking. He didn't call Marcus, didn't check on the Empire, didn't even look at his phone except to see if Lily had tried to contact him. She hadn't. The silence was deafening. On the 4th day, he finally left the apartment and took the bus across the city to his real office. A gleaming tower of steel and glass that he owned through 6 layers of shell companies. He walked through the lobby in his thrift store clothes and felt the security guard's eyes tracking him like he was a homeless man who'd wandered in by mistake. Nobody recognized him. After 2 months of being invisible, he'd gotten too good at it. He took the private elevator to the penthouse floor and used his fingerprint to access his office. Marcus was already there, sitting at Adrian's desk like he'd been running things in his absence. Which he had been. You look like hell, Marcus said without getting up. I feel worse. Adrian collapsed into one of the leather chairs that cost more than most people made in a month. Catch me up. What's happening with the organization? Everything's running smooth. The shipment from Chicago came through clean. The warehouse expansion in Newark is ahead of schedule. The politicians we bought last year are staying bought. Revenue's up 6%. Marcus paused. And Richard Voss was sentenced to 8 years this morning. Full asset forfeiture. He's finished. Adrian felt nothing. In his old life, watching an enemy fall would have brought satisfaction. Now, it just felt hollow. What about Lily? He asked. I've had someone watching her building from a distance, just making sure she's safe. She goes to work, comes home, goes to the community center twice a week. She's keeping the reading program running. Has she asked about me? Not that my guy can tell. She hasn't tried to contact you, hasn't mentioned you to anyone. Marcus stood and poured 2 glasses of scotch from the bar cart, 50-year-old single malt that Adrian could barely taste anymore. She's shutting you out completely. Adrian took the glass but didn't drink. I deserve that. Maybe. But Adrian, you need to make a decision here. Either accept that it's over and move on or figure out how to fix this. You can't keep living in limbo. How do I fix it? She doesn't want to see me. She told me to disappear. So prove you won't. Show her that you're serious about being in her life, even if she doesn't want you there right now. Marcus sat across from him. Look, I've known you for 20 years. I've seen you negotiate with men who wanted you dead. I've watched you build an empire from nothing. You don't give up when things get hard. So why are you giving up on her? Because I don't know how to fight for someone without using power and money. That's all I've ever had. Then learn. Figure out what she actually needs and give her that instead of what you think will solve her problems. Marcus leaned forward. What does Lily care about more than anything? The kids? The reading program? Then help with that. Not by throwing money at it, by showing up, by being useful, by proving that the person she met wasn't entirely a lie. Adrian finally took a drink, letting the burn ground him. She won't let me near the community center. She doesn't want to see me. So don't give her a choice. Show up anyway. Let her be angry. Let her hate you. But make her see that you're not running away just because things got hard. It was reckless and probably stupid and exactly the kind of advice Adrian would have given someone else. So that night, he went back to his apartment, his real apartment, the shabby one, and changed into his Nate Mercer clothes. Then he walked to the community center on Tuesday evening and pushed through the door. Lily was already there, setting up chairs with help from two of the older kids. She froze the moment she saw him, her face going pale and then red. What are you doing here? I'm volunteering, like I have been for the past 2 months. I told you to leave me alone. I know, but I also made a promise to these kids that I'd show up. And I'm keeping that promise. Adrian grabbed a stack of books from the corner and started organizing them on the shelf. You can throw me out if you want, but I'm going to keep coming back until you do. Lily looked like she wanted to scream at him, but the kids were watching, confused and curious, and she wasn't going to make a scene in front of them. Fine, she said through gritted teeth, but we're not talking. We're not friends. You're just here to help with the books. Understood. She turned her back on him and went back to setting up. And Adrian felt the smallest flicker of something that might have been hope. She hadn't thrown him out. That was something. The reading session was torture. Lily ignored him completely, directing all her attention to the kids and treating him like furniture. But Adrian showed up anyway, helped the kids sound out difficult words, distributed snacks, and cleaned up afterward. When the last child left, Lily finally looked at him. Why are you doing this? Because I care about this program. And because I care about you. You don't get to care about me anymore. You lost that right when you lied. I know, but I'm not going anywhere, Lily. You can be angry. You can hate me, but I'm going to keep showing up because that's what you do for people you love. You show up even when it's hard. Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed cold. Don't you dare use the word love. You don't love me. You don't even know me. I know you better than you think. I know you put everyone else first. I know you cry when you're happy and fight when you're scared. I know you give everything you have to kids who need someone to believe in them. And I know you deserve better than the lie I told you, but that doesn't change how I feel. Stop. Her voice broke. Just stop. You don't get to show up here and say beautiful things and expect me to forgive you. It doesn't work that way. I'm not expecting forgiveness. I'm just asking for a chance to prove that the person you met was real, even if the name was fake. Lily grabbed her bag and headed for the door. Lock up when you leave. She was gone before Adrian could respond, and he stood in the empty community center surrounded by children's books and broken dreams. But he'd showed up, and tomorrow he'd show up again. And the day after that, for as long as it took. The next week followed the same pattern. Adrian came to every reading session. Lily ignored him. The kids slowly stopped asking why Miss Lily and Mr. Nate weren't talking anymore. And every night, Adrian went home to his shabby apartment and tried to figure out how to be the man Lily needed instead of the man he'd been for 20 years. On Thursday of the second week, everything changed. Adrian was walking to the community center when he noticed a black SUV parked across the street. Engine running, windows tinted, posture all wrong. His instincts kicked in immediately. That was a surveillance vehicle, professional, not cops, not feds, someone from his world. He kept walking, pretending he hadn't noticed, and slipped into the community center through the side entrance. Marcus picked up on the first ring. Someone's watching the community center, Adrian said quietly. Black SUV, professional setup. Who is it? I don't know. Give me the license plate. Adrian rattled it off from memory, then hung up and went to find Lily. She was in the main room organizing books, and when she saw him, her expression went carefully blank. We need to talk, Adrian said. Right now. It's important. I don't want to talk to you. Lily, there's a surveillance vehicle outside. Someone's watching this building, and I need to know if you've noticed anyone following you or asking questions about me. Her face went pale. What? Why would anyone be watching me? Because of who I am. Because my world is dangerous and now you're connected to me whether we're together or not. Adrian moved to the window and looked out carefully. The SUV was still there. Have you noticed anything strange in the past week? Anyone paying too much attention to you? No, I don't think so. I haven't… She stopped. Wait, there was a guy at my office 2 days ago. He said he was from the medical billing company we work with, but something felt off about him. He asked a lot of questions about me personally, where I lived, what I did outside of work. What did you tell him? Nothing. I thought he was just being creepy, so I reported him to my supervisor. He left and I didn't think about it again. Adrian's jaw tightened. Someone was digging into Lily's life, which meant someone knew about the connection between them, which meant she was in danger. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. License plate registered to a shell company owned by the Volkov organization. They're fishing. Get her out of there. Adrian's blood went cold. The Volkovs were a Russian crime syndicate he'd had minimal contact with over the years, a rival organization that operated in overlapping territory. If they were investigating Lily, it meant they'd somehow connected her to Adrian and were trying to figure out if she was a weakness they could exploit. We need to leave, Adrian said. Right now. What are you talking about? The kids are going to start arriving in 20 minutes. Cancel the session. Call their parents. Do whatever you need to do, but we're not staying here. Adrian was already pulling out his phone. There are people outside who are dangerous, and they're watching you because of me. I need to get you somewhere safe. Lily stared at him like he'd lost his mind. This is insane. You're being paranoid. I'm being careful, and you need to trust me on this, Lily, please. Trust you? You want me to trust you after everything? Her voice was rising. You lied to me for months, and now you show up talking about dangerous people and surveillance, and I'm supposed to just believe you? Yes, because whether you hate me or not, I will do anything to keep you safe, and right now staying here puts you in danger. Lily opened her mouth to argue, but then the window behind her exploded inward. Adrian moved on pure instinct, tackling Lily to the ground and covering her body with his as glass rained down around them. Someone was shooting, not at them directly, but into the building. A warning shot, a message. Stay down, Adrian growled, pulling Lily behind a bookshelf. He could hear a car screeching away outside, and when he risked a look through the shattered window, the black SUV was gone. Lily was shaking underneath him, her eyes wide with terror. What just happened? Who's shooting at us? People from my world who think you matter to me, which means they'll use you to get to me if I don't get you somewhere safe. Adrian pulled out his phone and called Marcus. Someone just shot out the window at the community center. Lily's with me. I need extraction, and I need to know who ordered this. I'm sending a car. 2 minutes. And Adrian? The Volkovs just declared war. This wasn't a warning. It was the opening move. Adrian hung up and looked at Lily. She was still on the floor, breathing hard, her hands clenched into fists. This is because of you. Those people shot at me because of you. I know. I'm sorry. I never wanted this to touch you. But it did. It did touch me. And now what? I'm supposed to just go with you? Trust that you'll protect me when you're the reason I'm in danger in the first place? You don't have to trust me. But you do have to come with me right now, because if you stay here, they'll come back. And next time they won't miss. Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Okay, but after this, after you get me somewhere safe, I never want to see you again. Do you understand? I understand. A black sedan pulled up outside, one of Adrian's cars driven by one of Marcus's most trusted people. Adrian helped Lily to her feet and guided her through the back exit, keeping his body between her and any potential threats. They got into the car, and the driver pulled away smoothly, taking a route designed to lose any tails. Lily sat as far from Adrian as possible, her arms wrapped around herself. Where are we going? Somewhere the Volkovs can't reach you. A safe house I keep for emergencies. How long do I have to stay there? Until I handle this. Until I make sure they know you're not a target. And how do you do that? Adrian met her eyes, and for the first time since telling her the truth, he let her see exactly who he really was. Not Nate, the grocery clerk, not the man pretending to be powerless, but Adrian Vale, the crime boss who'd built an empire on calculated violence and strategic fear. I'm going to have a conversation with the Volkovs, and when I'm done, they'll understand that touching you was the biggest mistake they ever made. Lily looked away, but not before Adrian saw the fear in her eyes. Not fear of the Volkovs, fear of him, of the man he really was when the mask came off. The safe house was a luxury penthouse in a building Adrian owned, secure, comfortable, and completely untraceable. He showed Lily inside, and she stood in the middle of the marble foyer like she'd landed on another planet. "This is where you really live," she said quietly. "Not the apartment with the broken radiator and the stained carpet. This. I have several properties. This is one of them." "How many?" "Does it matter?" "Yes, because I'm trying to understand how big the lie was. How much of what you showed me was real, and how much was just you playing pretend." She turned to face him. "So, how many properties do you own, Adrian?" He'd never heard her say his real name before. It sounded wrong in her voice. 12 in this city alone. Another 30 across 4 states. Lily laughed, that same broken sound from the playground. 42 properties. And you let me think you were worried about making rent on a grocery store salary. I was trying to understand what it felt like to have nothing. Well, congratulations. You figured it out. It feels like this. Terrified and powerless and completely dependent on someone you can't trust. She walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. How long do I have to stay here? A few days, maybe a week, until I resolve things with the Volkovs. And what does resolve mean in your world? Are you going to kill people? The question hung in the air between them, and Adrian realized this was the moment. He could lie and tell her what she wanted to hear, or he could be honest and let her see the full truth of who he was. If I have to, yes, I'll do whatever's necessary to keep you safe. Lily closed her eyes. I don't know who you are. Yes, you do. You know exactly who I am. You just don't want to accept it. The Nate I knew would never talk about killing people like it was a business decision. Nate was me, Lily. The parts that showed up for you, that listened to kids read, that cared about your program, that was all me. It just wasn't the whole truth. How can I believe anything you say when you've been lying since the beginning? Adrian crossed the room and stood behind her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel his presence. Because I'm not lying anymore. I'm showing you everything. The money, the power, the violence, the decisions I've made to get here. And I'm telling you that despite all of it, the person you met at that grocery store was the most honest version of myself I've been in 20 years. Lily turned to face him, and Adrian saw the war happening behind her eyes. She wanted to believe him, but she'd been hurt too many times to trust easily. I need to be alone, she said. Please. Adrian showed her to one of the guest bedrooms, then went to his office and called Marcus. She's secure. Now tell me everything about the Volkovs. Marcus filled him in quickly. The Volkov organization had been expanding aggressively into territories that bordered Adrian's operations. They'd been testing boundaries for months, and apparently they'd decided to test whether Adrian had any weaknesses they could exploit. Someone had connected Lily to him, probably through the investigation into Voss or through someone who'd seen them together. And now they were sending a message. We can reach the people you care about. What do you want me to do? Marcus asked. Set up a meeting, tomorrow, neutral ground, just me and whoever leads their operation in this city. Adrian, that's dangerous. They just shot at your girl. You can't trust them to play fair in a face-to-face. I don't plan to play fair either, but they need to understand that Lily is off limits. And the only way to make that clear is to look them in the eye and explain what happens if they touch her again. And if they don't listen, then we go to war. And I make sure everyone in this city knows what happens when someone threatens the people I love. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You really love her, don't you? More than I've ever loved anything, which is why I'll burn this entire city down before I let someone hurt her. The meeting was set for the following evening at a restaurant Adrian owned. Technically, neutral ground since he wasn't using it to gain advantage, but still his territory. He spent the day making arrangements, positioning resources, and preparing for every possible outcome. Then he went to check on Lily. She was sitting on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the city. She didn't turn when he approached. "There's a meeting tonight," Adrian said, "with the people who shot at the community center. I'm going to make sure they understand you're not involved in my business." "And then what? I just go back to my life and pretend none of this happened?" "If that's what you want, yes. I'll make sure you're protected from a distance. You'll never have to see me again." Lily finally looked at him, and her eyes were red from crying. "Is that what you want?" "No. I want you to give me a chance to prove I'm more than the lie I told. But I'll accept whatever you decide." "How can I trust you again, Adrian? How can I look at you and not wonder what else you're hiding?" "Because I'm not hiding anything anymore. This is who I am. A man who built an empire on violence and fear, who has more money than he knows what to do with, who's made choices that most people would find unforgivable. But I'm also the man who showed up to your reading program every week, who listened to kids stumble through picture books, who fell in love with you because you're the most genuine person I've ever met." He paused. "I can't undo the lie, but I can promise that from now on, you'll only get the truth, even when it's ugly." Lily pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "I don't know if that's enough." "I know, but it's all I have to offer." He left her there and went to prepare for the meeting, knowing that the next few hours would determine not just whether he could protect Lily, but whether she would ever let him close enough to try again. The restaurant was empty except for Adrian, Marcus, and 4 armed security positioned discreetly throughout the space. At exactly 8 p.m., 3 men walked through the front door. 2 were clearly muscle, broad-shouldered, cold-eyed, wearing suits that didn't quite hide their weapons. The third was older, maybe 50, with silver hair and the kind of calm that came from decades of surviving in a world where mistakes meant death. His name was Dmitry Volkov, and he ran the family's operations in the northeastern United States. "Mr. Vale," Dmitry said as he approached the table, "thank you for agreeing to meet. Let's skip the pleasantries. You shot at someone under my protection. I want to know why, and I want to know what it's going to take for you to never do it again." Dmitry sat down across from Adrian and smiled, a cold, calculating expression. "Direct. I appreciate that. The truth is simple. We're expanding. Your territories overlap with ours. We needed to understand your vulnerabilities so we know how hard to push. And you thought threatening an innocent woman was the best way to test me? We thought it would get your attention. It did." Dmitry poured himself water from the pitcher on the table. "But here's what I learned from that little test. You care about her, which means she's leverage, which means she's valuable." Adrian's voice went deadly quiet. "She's also off limits." "Is she? Because from where I'm sitting, she's exactly the kind of pressure point that makes stubborn men reasonable." "Then let me make myself very clear. If anyone from your organization goes near Lily Hart again, if anyone even looks at her, speaks to her, or thinks about using her to get to me, I will consider it a declaration of war. And when I go to war, Dmitry, I don't stop until there's nothing left of my enemies but cautionary tales." Dmitry's smile didn't waver. "That's a very dramatic threat, Mr. Vale, but threats only work if you're willing to follow through, and I'm not convinced you're ready to risk everything over one woman." Adrian leaned forward. "Then let me demonstrate my commitment." He pulled out his phone and showed Dmitry a photograph. It showed Dmitry's youngest daughter, a college student in Boston, walking across campus with friends. Dmitry's smile vanished. "I'm not threatening her," Adrian said calmly. "I'm showing you that I have the same capabilities you demonstrated yesterday. The difference is, I'm choosing not to use them. Because targeting innocent people is a line I won't cross unless you force me to." "You would go after my family?" "Only if you make me. But understand this. I will protect Lily with everything I have. If that means burning your organization to the ground, I'll do it. If it means spending every resource I've accumulated over 20 years, I'll do it. If it means sacrificing pieces of my own empire, I'll do it." Adrian put the phone away. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of here and forget Lily exists. You're going to pull your people back and focus your expansion elsewhere. And in return, I won't interfere with your operations in territories that don't overlap with mine." "And if I refuse?" Then tomorrow morning, every law enforcement agency in the state receives detailed documentation of your organization's activities, your shell companies, your money laundering operations, your trafficking routes, all of it. And while you're busy fighting federal charges, I'll systematically dismantle everything you've built. Dmitri stared at him for a long moment, and Adrian could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. Finally, the older man stood. You're making a mistake, Mr. Vale. Love makes men weak. Maybe, but it also makes us willing to do things we'd never do for ourselves. Adrian stayed seated. Do we have an understanding? For now. But Vale, if your feelings for this woman ever become less important than your empire, remember that we know where she lives. It was a threat disguised as acknowledgement, and Adrian let it slide. Because he'd made his point, and Dmitri had implicitly agreed to back off. At least for now. After the Volkovs left, Marcus sat down across from Adrian. That was risky. You just showed them exactly how much she means to you. I know, but it was the only way to make them understand she's not a pawn they can use. And if they come back later? If they decide to test you again? Then I'll do exactly what I promised. I'll destroy them. Adrian stood and headed for the door. But right now, I need to go tell Lily she's safe. And then I need to figure out if she'll ever forgive me for dragging her into this world in the first place. He found her in the penthouse kitchen, making tea with shaking hands. When she saw him, she set down the kettle. Is it done? It's done. They won't come after you again. How can you be sure? Because I made it clear what the consequences would be if they did, and because they're rational enough to know that some targets aren't worth the cost. Lily wrapped her arms around herself. I hate this. I hate that my safety depends on you threatening people. I hate that I'm some kind of pawn in a game between criminals. I hate all of it. I know, I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. It doesn't change anything. She looked at him with exhausted eyes. I want to go home, Adrian, my real home. My apartment with the neighbors I know and the life I built for myself. I'll have someone take you, but Lily, I need you to understand that even though the immediate threat is handled, you're always going to be connected to me now. People know we were together. They know I care about you, and that makes you valuable to anyone who wants to hurt me. So what am I supposed to do? Live in fear forever? Hire bodyguards? Change my name and disappear? No, you live your life, and I make sure you're protected without you having to think about it. Surveillance that you'll never notice. Resources positioned to respond if you're ever in danger. A safety net that's invisible but always there. That's not living, Adrian. That's existing in a cage you built. It's the best I can offer. The only way I know how to keep you safe is to use the power I have, even if you hate me for it. Lily was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Take me home. Adrian drove her himself, something he hadn't done in years. They didn't talk during the 20-minute ride. When they pulled up in front of her building, Lily reached for the door handle, then stopped. I need time, she said without looking at him. Time to figure out if I can live with who you really are. Time to decide if what we had was real enough to survive the lie you told. How much time? I don't know. But Adrian, don't wait for me. Don't put your life on hold or make decisions based on whether I forgive you. Figure out who you want to be. And then, if I'm ready, maybe we can figure out if there's anything left to save. She got out of the car and walked into her building without looking back. And Adrian sat there until the lights came on in her apartment. Then he drove back to his penthouse and made a decision. He'd spent 2 months pretending to be powerless to find out if anyone could love him. He'd found his answer. Lily had loved him. Maybe she still did, underneath the hurt and anger. But Marcus had been right about something. Love made men weak. Not because it destroyed them, but because it forced them to become something different, something better. And if Adrian wanted any chance of winning Lily back, he needed to become the kind of man who deserved her, not by pretending to be poor, but by using his power for something other than himself. He called Marcus. I need you to set up a meeting with our attorneys. I want to create a foundation. A foundation for what? For kids like the ones in Lily's program. Community centers in poor neighborhoods, reading initiatives, after-school programs, everything that keeps kids safe and gives them a chance. Adrian paused. And I want it funded properly. Enough to make a real difference. Adrian, that's going to take a significant portion of your assets. I know, do it anyway. This is about her, isn't it? It's about being the man she thought I was, the one who cared about something other than power and money. Adrian looked out at the city lights. I can't undo the lie, but maybe I can prove that the person she met was who I'm trying to become. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Okay, I'll set it up. But Adrian, make sure you're doing this for the right reasons. Not to win her back, but because it's who you actually want to be. I am. For the first time in my life, I know exactly who I want to be. He hung up and stood at the window, looking out at the city he'd controlled from the shadows for 20 years. Tomorrow, he'd start building something different, something that mattered. And maybe, if he was lucky and if Lily was willing to give him one more chance, she'd see that the man she'd fallen for wasn't entirely a fiction after all. 3 weeks passed, and Adrian kept his promise. He didn't call Lily, didn't show up at the community center, didn't try to force his way back into her life. Instead, he threw himself into building something that might actually matter. The foundation came together faster than he'd anticipated. Marcus worked with a team of attorneys to structure it properly, a nonprofit organization designed to fund reading programs, after-school activities, and community centers in underserved neighborhoods. Adrian transferred $40 million into the endowment on day one, with plans to add more as the organization grew. You're serious about this, Marcus said one afternoon as they reviewed the paperwork in Adrian's office. More serious than I've been about anything in years. Adrian signed the final document establishing the foundation's board of directors. How long until we can start making grant? 2 weeks, maybe 3. We need to set up the application process, hire staff to review proposals, establish criteria for funding. Marcus paused. Are you going to tell her about what you're doing? No. If she finds out, it needs to be because the foundation is real and doing real work, not because I'm using it to manipulate her into forgiving me. And if she never finds out, if she just thinks you went back to your old life and forgot about her? Adrian looked out the window at the city sprawling below. Then at least something good came from knowing her. At least her influence made me into someone worth being. But staying away from Lily was harder than any negotiation Adrian had ever conducted. He wanted to know if she was okay, if the kids were asking about him, if she missed him even a fraction of how much he missed her. He'd broken his own rule twice, driving past her apartment late at night just to see the lights on and know she was safe. On the 4th week, Marcus brought him news that changed everything. The Volkovs are making noise again, Marcus said, his expression grim. Nothing direct, but they've been asking questions about your operations, testing boundaries, and I heard through back channels that Dimitri's been telling people the meeting was a bluff, that you wouldn't actually go to war over a woman. Adrian's jaw tightened. Then he didn't understand me as well as I thought. The problem is he might be right, because if this escalates, Lily becomes a target again. And you can't protect her if you're fighting a full-scale war with the Volkovs. So what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you need to make a choice. The Empire or the girl. Because you can't have both. Not anymore. Adrian had known this moment was coming, had felt it building since the night Lily walked away. His empire demanded ruthlessness. It required him to respond to threats with overwhelming force, to never show weakness, to prioritize power over everything else. But Lily had shown him what it felt like to be human instead of a weapon, and going back to the man he'd been before meeting her felt impossible now. Set up another meeting with Dimitri, Adrian said quietly, but this time, I'm not threatening. I'm offering a deal. The meeting happened 2 days later in the same restaurant. Dimitri arrived with the same security, the same cold smile, and the same underestimation of what Adrian was willing to sacrifice. Back so soon, Dimitri said as he sat down. I thought we had an understanding. We did, but I'm here to offer you something better. Adrian slid a folder across the table. Inside is a complete map of my operations in 3 territories that border yours. Distribution networks, key personnel, financial structures. Everything you'd need to take them over cleanly. Dimitri opened the folder, his expression shifting from amusement to confusion. This is detailed intelligence. Why would you give me this? Because I'm getting out. I'm dismantling my organization piece by piece, and I'd rather hand territories to someone who will manage them professionally than watch them collapse into chaos. Adrian leaned back. You wanted to expand. I'm giving you the expansion. No war, no bloodshed, just a clean transfer. Ishu, you're walking away from an empire you built over 20 years because of a woman? I'm walking away because I realized I built the wrong thing. Power and money aren't worth having if you can't use them for something that matters. Dmitri studied him carefully. This is a trick. You're setting me up somehow. It's not a trick. It's a business decision. I want out, and you want in. We can fight each other and both lose resources, or we can make a deal that benefits us both. Adrian pulled out another document. All I need is your word that Lily Hart is permanently off limits. No surveillance, no threats, no contact of any kind. She gets to live her life without ever knowing your organization exists. And if I agree to this, you'll just disappear? Give up everything? Not everything. I'm keeping enough assets to fund legitimate businesses and a nonprofit foundation. But the criminal operations? Those are yours if you want them, along with my promise that I won't interfere with how you run them. Dmitri was quiet for a long moment, clearly trying to find the angle Adrian was playing. But there wasn't one. This was exactly what it appeared to be. A man choosing love over power. You're a fool, Dmitri said finally. In 6 months, you'll regret this. You'll miss the influence, the control, the fear you commanded. And by then, it'll be too late to get it back. Maybe. But at least I'll know I tried to be someone worth loving. Adrian stood. Do we have a deal? Dmitri stood as well and extended his hand. We have a deal. Your territories for the girl's safety. Permanently. They shook on it, and Adrian felt something he hadn't expected. Relief. He was giving up everything he'd spent 2 decades building, and instead of grief, he felt free. Over the next month, Adrian systematically dismantled his empire. He transferred operations to the Volkovs as agreed. He set up legitimate business ventures for the people who'd been loyal to him, giving them exit strategies that didn't end in prison or graves. He liquidated assets and funneled the money into the foundation and investments that didn't require him to be a criminal. Marcus stayed with him through all of it, even though Adrian gave him the option to walk away. You've been with me for 20 years, Adrian said one afternoon as they finalized the last transfer. You could take your share and build your own organization. You don't have to follow me into whatever comes next. What comes next? Marcus asked. Honestly, I have no idea. But it's not this. It's not looking over my shoulder and wondering when the next war will start. It's not making decisions that require people to get hurt. So what is it? Adrian thought about Lily reading to kids in a broken-down community center, about her giving everything she had to make their lives a little better, about the way she'd looked at him when she thought he was just Nate, like he mattered for reasons that had nothing to do with what he could provide. It's trying to be the man she thought I was, even if she never knows I'm trying. Marcus smiled. Then I'm in. Because honestly, I'm tired of this life too. I'm tired of hurting people. And if you're building something better, I want to be part of it. By week 6, the transition was complete. Adrian Vale, the crime boss, ceased to exist. What remained was just Adrian, a man with considerable legitimate wealth, a nonprofit foundation that was starting to make grants to community programs, and a hole in his chest where Lily used to be. He still hadn't contacted her, still kept his promise to give her time and space. But the foundation's first round of grants was about to be announced, and Lily's community center was on the list. Not because Adrian had engineered it, the foundation's board made decisions independently, but because her program was exactly the kind of work they'd been created to support, which meant she'd find out soon. And Adrian had no idea how she'd react. The call came on a Tuesday evening while Adrian was in his office reviewing legitimate business proposals. Marcus stuck his head in the door. She's here. Adrian's heart stopped. What? Lily, she's downstairs. She asked to see you. Adrian stood so fast his chair rolled backward. Did she say what she wants? No, but she looked determined. Should I send her up? Adrian took a breath, trying to steady himself. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, played out every possible conversation, but now that it was happening, his mind went blank. Yeah, send her up. He had 30 seconds to compose himself before his office door opened and Lily walked in. She looked different than the last time he'd seen her, stronger somehow, like the past 6 weeks had given her time to find solid ground under her feet. But she also looked nervous, her hands clasped together in front of her. Hi, she said quietly. Hi. Adrian stayed behind his desk, giving her space. I'm surprised to see you. I'm surprised to be here. Lily took a few steps into the room, looking around at the expensive furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows. This is where you really work, where Adrian Vale exists instead of Nate Mercer. This is one of my offices. But Lily, I'm not... Let me talk first, please. She took a breath. I got a letter yesterday from something called the Cornerstone Foundation. They're offering a $50,000 grant to my reading program, full funding for a year with the possibility of renewal. Adrian's chest tightened. That's incredible. Congratulations. I thought it was a mistake at first, or some kind of scam. So I looked into the foundation, and I found out it was established 6 weeks ago by an anonymous donor who funded it with $40 million. And the foundation's mission is to support exactly the kind of programs I've been running on pennies and hope. She looked at him directly. Did you do this? I funded the foundation, but I didn't make the grant decision. The board operates independently. They review applications and make choices based on merit. But you created it. You took $40 million and put it toward helping kids in poor neighborhoods. Why? Adrian came around the desk, staying a respectful distance away. Because you showed me what actually matters. You gave everything you had to help children nobody else cared about, and you expected nothing in return. That's more real than anything I built in 20 years of running a criminal empire. So I decided to build something real instead. Lily's eyes filled with tears. You did this because of me. I did it because of who you helped me become. Because after meeting you, I couldn't go back to being the man I was before. And because if I couldn't have you in my life, at least I could honor what you taught me. Adrian, She stopped, wiping at her eyes. I've spent 6 weeks trying to figure out if I can forgive you. If I can reconcile the man I fell for with the man you actually are, and I kept going in circles because I was asking the wrong question. What's the right question? Whether you're trying to be better, whether the person I met was just an act, or whether he was who you're trying to become. She took a step closer. So I need to know, is the foundation real, or is it just another manipulation to win me back? It's real. I've dismantled my entire criminal organization, transferred operations, walked away from territories, given up everything except legitimate businesses and assets I can use to fund the foundation. Adrian met her eyes. I'm not a crime boss anymore, Lily. I'm just a man trying to figure out how to use money and influence for something other than myself. You gave up your empire? For what? For the possibility of being someone you could respect, someone who deserves a woman like you. He paused. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to give me another chance. I just needed you to know that meeting you changed my life. And whether you're part of my future or not, I'm grateful for that. Lily was crying openly now, and Adrian wanted desperately to reach for her but made himself stay still. I was so angry at you, she said through her tears. So hurt and betrayed. You made me feel small and stupid and used. I know. I'm sorry. But then I started thinking about the person you were when you showed up at the community center. The way you listened to the kids. The way you helped without making a big deal about it. The way you looked at me like I mattered. She wiped at her face. That person was real, wasn't he? That wasn't an act. No, that was me. The most honest version of myself I've been in years. Then why did you lie about everything else? Adrian finally closed the distance between them, but still didn't touch her. Because I'd spent 20 years surrounded by people who wanted something from me. Money, power, access, protection. Nobody saw me. They saw what I could do for them. And I wanted to know if it was possible for someone to care about me when I had nothing to offer. So I became nothing. And I met you. And I fell for the nothing version of you. You fell for the real version of me. The one who existed underneath all the power and money and fear. The one who wanted to matter for reasons that had nothing to do with what I could provide. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. I should have told you the truth from the beginning. I should have trusted that what we had was strong enough to survive it, and I'm sorry I didn't. Lily looked down at their joined hands. I don't know if I can trust you again. Not completely. Not yet. I understand. But I want to try. Because the man I fell for showed me what it feels like to be seen and valued and cared for, and I don't want to lose that because you made a mistake. Adrian's throat went tight. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm willing to give you a chance. Not to be Nate Mercer, the grocery clerk, but to be Adrian Vale, the man who's trying to build something better. The one who funds reading programs and walks away from empires and shows up even when it's hard. She looked up at him with eyes that were both vulnerable and strong. But you need to promise me something. Anything. No more lies. No more secrets. If you're going to be in my life, I need complete honesty. Even when it's ugly, even when you think I can't handle it, I need to know who you really are, all the time. I promise, complete honesty. Always. And I need time. I need to learn who Adrian is instead of who Nate was. I need to see if the person you're becoming is someone I can build a life with. How much time? Lily smiled, a real smile that made Adrian's heart ache. However long it takes. Because if this is real, if we're real, it's worth getting it right. Adrian pulled her close and kissed her forehead, not trusting himself to speak. She wrapped her arms around him and held on tight, and for the first time in 6 weeks, Adrian felt like he could breathe properly. I missed you, Lily whispered against his chest. I tried not to. I tried to be angry and move on, but I missed you so much it hurt. I missed you too, every single day. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in Adrian's office while the city lights flickered on outside. Then Lily pulled back and looked at him seriously. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay? Are you really done with the criminal stuff? Completely done? Because I can't be with someone who lives that life. I can't spend every day wondering if you're going to get arrested or killed or if someone's going to come after me again. I'm done. I transferred everything to another organization and walked away. The only things I kept are legitimate businesses and the money to fund the foundation. I'm not a crime boss anymore, Lily. I'm just a man with resources trying to figure out how to use them for good. And you're okay with that? You don't regret giving up the power? Adrian thought about his empire, the fear he'd commanded, the control he'd wielded, the wealth he'd accumulated. Then he thought about reading stories to kids in a broken-down community center. About Lily's smile when she talked about helping children nobody else cared about the way she'd made him feel human instead of a weapon. I don't regret it at all. That life was empty. It was just power for the sake of power. But this? Building something that actually helps people? Being with you? That's worth more than any empire. Lily studied his face like she was looking for cracks in the truth. Then she nodded. Okay, I believe you. Just like that? Just like that. Because I can see it in your eyes. You're different than you were 6 weeks ago. Lighter, somehow. Like you've been carrying something heavy and finally put it down. She was right. Adrian had been carrying the weight of his empire for 20 years, and walking away from it had lifted a burden he hadn't fully realized was there. So what happens now? He asked. Now we start over. Properly this time. No lies. No pretending. Just two people trying to figure out if they can build something real together. I'd like that, Lily smiled. Good. Because I already accepted the foundation's grant, and I'm going to need help figuring out how to actually use $50,000. I've never had that kind of budget before. I can help with that, or the foundation staff can. Whatever you need. What I need is for you to come to the reading session on Thursday, not as Nate Mercer pretending to be poor, but as Adrian Vale trying to be better. I want the kids to meet the real you. Adrian's chest tightened. Are you sure? They knew me as Nate. It might confuse them. They're kids. They're resilient. And honestly, I think they'll like knowing that the guy who helped them read picture books is also the guy funding programs like ours all over the city. It'll show them that people with power can choose to use it for good. Okay, I'll be there. Thursday came faster than Adrian expected. He showed up at the community center wearing clothes that actually fit properly, and the kids swarmed him immediately. Mr. Nate, you came back! Where have you been? Miss Lily said you were busy with work, but we missed you. Lily came over and gently quieted them. Everyone, I need to tell you something. Mr. Nate's real name is Adrian. He's been going through some big changes in his life, and he hasn't been able to come to our sessions. But he's here now, and he wants to help. Maya, the girl with braids, looked up at him suspiciously. Why did you lie about your name? Leave it to a child to ask the hardest question immediately. Adrian knelt down so he was at eye level with her. Because I made a mistake. I thought people would treat me differently if they knew who I really was. But I learned that lying to people you care about always causes more problems than it solves. Did you lie to Miss Lily too? Yes. And I hurt her feelings very badly. But did you say sorry? I did, and I'm trying to be better now. Maya considered this seriously. Okay, but don't lie anymore. Lying is bad. You're absolutely right. I won't lie anymore. Promise? I promise. That seemed to satisfy her, and the other kids accepted it just as easily. Within minutes, they were pulling Adrian toward the books and asking him to help them read. And everything felt almost normal, except it was better than normal, because this time Adrian wasn't pretending. He was just himself, helping kids learn to read in a community center that would now have the resources to actually thrive. After the session ended and the kids had gone home, Adrian helped Lily clean up. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, and then Lily said, "You were good with them tonight. Better than before, actually." "How so?" "You weren't trying so hard to be invisible. You just showed up and helped. It felt more natural. Maybe because I'm not trying to be someone else anymore. I'm just trying to be me, whatever that means." Lily set down the book she was organizing and came over to him. "I'm proud of you for walking away from that life, for building the foundation, for showing up today even though you knew it would be hard. I'm just trying to be someone you can be proud of." "You already are." She kissed him softly, and Adrian felt something he'd been chasing his entire life finally click into place. Acceptance, belonging, the certainty that someone saw him completely and chose him anyway. Over the following months, Adrian and Lily built something neither of them had expected. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when Lily's trust wavered, when she questioned whether he was being completely honest. And there were moments when Adrian struggled with having given up the power and control that had defined him for so long. But they worked through it together. Lily learned to trust again, slowly and carefully, and Adrian learned to be vulnerable in ways he'd never allowed himself before. The foundation grew, funding programs across the city. Adrian hired staff, established proper protocols, and made sure the work continued without requiring his constant oversight. He also converted several of his legitimate businesses into ventures that employed people from the neighborhoods where Lily's program operated, giving them opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise. 6 months after that first reading session where Adrian came back as himself, he and Lily were having dinner at her apartment. A simple meal she'd cooked, nothing fancy. They were talking about the foundation's expansion plans when Adrian suddenly stopped mid-sentence. "What?" Lily asked. "I just realized something. I'm happy." "That's what you just realized? That you're happy?" "No, I mean, I've never been happy before. Not like this. I had satisfaction when I closed deals or expanded territory. I had pleasure when I made money or defeated enemies. But I've never had this feeling of just being content with where I am and who I'm with." Lily reached across the table and took his hand. "Welcome to normal life." "It's pretty great, isn't it? It's better than anything I built before. Even better than being a powerful crime boss. Especially better than that, because that was just power for the sake of power. This is actually meaningful." Lily smiled, but then her expression turned serious. "Can I ask you something, and I need you to be honest? Always. Do you ever regret it? Giving up everything for me?" Adrian didn't hesitate. "Never. Not for a single second. You didn't ask me to give it up. I made that choice because I realized I'd built the wrong life. You just showed me what the right one could look like." "And you're really okay with this? With being just a regular guy with a foundation and some businesses instead of running an empire?" "I'm more than okay with it. I'm grateful. Because if I'd stayed in that life, I would have died alone and empty, surrounded by people who feared me but didn't actually care about me. And I would never have known what it felt like to be loved for who I am instead of what I can do." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I do love you, you know. Not the crime boss, not the grocery clerk, just you. Adrian Vale, the man who's trying every day to be better than he was. I love you too, more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone." They kissed across the small table, and later that night, lying in Lily's bed in her modest apartment, Adrian thought about how far he'd come. From a penthouse overlooking the city to a one-bedroom with thin walls and neighbors who argued too loud. From commanding fear to helping kids read picture books. From untouchable to completely vulnerable. And he wouldn't change a single thing. A year after Adrian had told Lily the truth, the foundation held its first annual gala to celebrate the programs they'd funded and the impact they'd made. Lily had fought Adrian on attending, insisting she didn't belong at fancy events with wealthy donors. But he'd convinced her that the kids' success stories needed to be told, and she was the best person to tell them. So now she stood at the microphone in a simple black dress that Adrian had helped her pick out, speaking to a room full of people who could write six-figure checks without blinking. "Most of you don't know what it's like to be invisible," Lily said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "To walk through the world and have people look straight through you because you're poor or overweight or just ordinary. I've been invisible my whole life, and I learned to accept it, to make myself smaller so I wouldn't bother anyone." She paused, and Adrian watched from his table, his heart swelling with pride. "But then I started a reading program for kids who were just as invisible as me. Kids whose parents worked 3 jobs and couldn't help with homework. Kids who were behind in school because nobody had time to teach them. Kids who needed someone to tell them they mattered." Lily's voice strengthened. "And I realized that being invisible wasn't a permanent condition. It was just what happened when the people with power and resources chose not to look." She gestured around the room. "All of you have power. You have resources. And tonight, you're choosing to look. You're choosing to invest in programs that help invisible kids become seen, that help struggling communities become strong, that help people like me believe we deserve better." The room was completely silent, hanging on every word. "The Cornerstone Foundation gave my program a grant that changed everything. We went from barely surviving to actually thriving. We've doubled our enrollment. We've added art classes and tutoring. We've created a safe space where 20 kids know they matter." Lily's eyes found Adrian's across the room. "And it happened because someone decided that power should be used to help people instead of just accumulating more power." She finished her speech to standing ovation, and Adrian stood with everyone else, applauding the woman who'd transformed his entire existence. Later, after the gala ended and they were driving home, Lily leaned her head on his shoulder. "I can't believe I just spoke in front of 300 rich people. You were incredible. I'm pretty sure you convinced half of them to start their own foundations. Good. The world needs more people using their money for something that matters." She paused. "Thank you for pushing me to do that. I almost said no." "I'm glad you didn't. Those people needed to hear your story. They needed to understand that the programs they're funding aren't just statistics. They're real children with real lives being changed." "Adrian?" "Yeah? I'm ready." He pulled back to look at her. "Ready for what?" "To stop taking things slow. To stop holding back pieces of myself because I'm scared you'll hurt me again." She met his eyes. "You've proven yourself. You've been patient and honest and consistent. You've shown me every day that you're serious about being better. And I don't want to waste any more time being cautious when I could just be happy." Adrian's heart was pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to build a life with you, not someday. Now. I want to wake up next to you and fall asleep in your arms and make decisions together about what comes next. I want all of it." Adrian pulled the car over to the side of the road so he could give her his full attention. "Are you sure? Because Lily, once we do this, I'm never letting you go. You'll be stuck with me forever." "Promise?" "Promise." She kissed him, and Adrian tasted salt and realized she was crying happy tears. When they pulled apart, she was smiling so wide it made his chest ache. "I love you, Adrian Vale. The real you. The one who gave up an empire to be someone worth loving. I love you too. And you're wrong about one thing." "What?" "I didn't give up an empire to be someone worth loving. I gave it up because loving you was worth more than any empire I could build." 2 years later, Adrian stood in the community center, now completely renovated with foundation funding, and watched Lily teach a room full of kids who'd grown up in neighborhoods where nobody expected them to succeed. The center had expanded to include art classes, music lessons, and a computer lab. It employed 5 full-time staff and served over 100 children every week. And in 6 months, it would have a new director to help Lily manage the growth. Because Lily was pregnant and she'd finally agreed to take a step back from the daily operations so she could prepare for their daughter. Adrian had proposed a year ago, on the anniversary of the day he'd told her the truth. They'd gotten married in a small ceremony at the same community center, surrounded by the kids Lily had spent years helping and the staff who'd become their extended family. No elaborate reception, no society guests, just the people who actually mattered. Marcus had been Adrian's best man. He'd left the old life behind too, and now ran the Foundation's operations with the same efficiency he'd once applied to criminal enterprises. "You ready for this?" Marcus had asked Adrian the morning of the wedding. "Marriage, fatherhood, the whole domestic thing? More ready than I've ever been for anything." No regrets about the old life? Adrian had thought about it honestly. Then he'd shaken his head. "The old life made me powerful. This life makes me happy. There's no comparison." Now, watching Lily read to the kids with one hand resting on her growing belly, Adrian knew he'd made the right choice. He'd spent 20 years building an empire that meant nothing. And then he'd met a shy woman in a purple jacket who'd shown him what actually mattered. Lily looked up and caught him watching. She smiled, that same genuine smile from the grocery store all those years ago, and mouthed, "I love you." Adrian smiled back and mouthed the same words. And in that moment, he understood something fundamental. He'd come into this experiment looking for someone who could love him when he had nothing to offer. But what he'd found was so much more than that. He'd found someone who'd loved him enough to make him want to be better. Someone who'd shown him that real power wasn't about control or fear. It was about using what you had to make other people's lives better. Someone who'd transformed him from a hollow man with an empire into a whole person with a purpose. And in return, he'd given her everything he'd once guarded so fiercely: his truth, his vulnerability, his complete and absolute devotion. After the reading session ended and Lily finished saying goodbye to the last child, she came over to where Adrian was organizing supplies. "You're staring at me again," she said, but she was smiling. "Can't help it. You're beautiful when you're teaching." "I'm 7 months pregnant and my feet are swelling. I am not beautiful." "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Adrian pulled her close, careful of her belly. "How are you feeling? Tired? Happy? Excited? Terrified? All of it at once." "Me too." "Yeah? The big bad former crime boss is terrified of becoming a dad?" "Absolutely terrified. What if I mess her up? What if I can't protect her? What if she grows up and realizes her father used to be a criminal?" Lily cupped his face in her hands. "Then we'll deal with it together. We'll teach her that people can change, that mistakes don't define you forever, that choosing to be better is what matters." She paused. "And Adrian, you're going to be an amazing father because you know what it's like to grow up without love, and you'll make sure she never feels that way." Adrian kissed her forehead, overwhelmed by how much faith she had in him. Faith he was still learning to have in himself. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible, for believing I could be better, for giving me a reason to want to be better. You did the hard part. I just showed you what was possible." They locked up the community center and walked home together through streets that had once been dangerous but were slowly becoming safer as the Foundation's programs took root. Lily talked about baby names and nursery colors, and Adrian listened and contributed and felt a contentment so profound it still surprised him sometimes. That night, lying in bed with Lily asleep beside him, and his hand resting on her belly where his daughter was growing, Adrian thought about the question that had started this entire journey. Can anyone love me when I have nothing to offer? The answer, he'd learned, was yes, but the real revelation was understanding what nothing actually meant. He'd thought it meant being broke and powerless, but the truth was, he'd had nothing to offer emotionally when he'd started this experiment. He'd been hollow and isolated and incapable of real connection. It wasn't money or status that people needed from him. It was honesty, vulnerability, the willingness to be seen completely and to see others in return. And Lily had taught him all of that, had loved him through his worst mistakes and his best attempts at redemption, had chosen him not despite his past, but because of how hard he'd fought to become someone different. Their daughter kicked against his palm, and Adrian smiled in the darkness. In 6 months, she'd be here, and he'd get to show her a version of himself that had been impossible before meeting Lily. A man who used his resources to help instead of hurt, who showed up for people who needed him, who understood that real strength came from choosing kindness even when you had the power to be cruel. He'd been the invisible man once, testing whether anyone could see him. And Lily had looked straight through his disguise and found the person he was meant to be all along. That person wasn't a crime boss or a grocery clerk. He was just Adrian, flawed and trying and completely, irrevocably in love with the woman who'd made him believe that second chances were possible and that becoming better was worth more than staying powerful. And as he drifted off to sleep beside her, Adrian knew with absolute certainty that he'd spend the rest of his life proving she'd been right to believe in him. Not with grand gestures or displays of wealth, but with the small, consistent choices that showed her every single day that she mattered more than any empire he could have built. Because in the end, that's what love actually was. Not a test, not a transaction, just two people choosing each other, again and again, and building something real from the pieces of who they used to be.